with him last year on a project, and we can get into that a little bit later. But without further ado, let's switch over and we can see all this. Hey, Billy.
Hello.
What's going on? Yeah, so I think that the easiest thing we can do is just have you give like a little quick intro about yourself, who you are, and kind of what you do, and then we can get into the rest of it. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, so I'm a freelance Cinema 4D artist. Been freelancing. This is going into my fourth year. Yeah,
Mm.
that sounds about right. I think I started in 2017 as a freelancer. I was full time at another smaller studio here in the Detroit area for about 3 years or so. Prior to that. So I've been doing my thing for a bit, kind of midway or entering kind of the midway point of my career, I feel. So gotten some cool opportunities to work on projects with, established companies and clients and all that. It's definitely a fun part. It's,
Hmm.
been a lot of work to get here, of course. Many nights when I was in school learning this stuff, focusing on schoolwork during the day at community college where I attended, and
Hmm.
then coming home and hammering out all the video co-pilot Andrew Kramer, Nick Campbell GSG
Yeah,
stuff,
it's a very
all
familiar path that I think a lot of people have.
all yeah, I mean all the classics. I guess maybe the slightly fun and maybe more unique intro is the steps prior to that
Mm.
at school, because like the whole reason I kind of stumbled into like motion graphics and 3D specifically was uh, it was completely unplanned. I kind of worked my way through high school, didn't have like super great grades to the point where I'd have like super awesome scholarships and like full rides to go to like school because like
Hmm.
art was not even on my radar in high school. Um, I wanted to go into like physics or science or
Oh
something like
wow.
that, and I was like, well, uh, I am afraid of taking on all the debt to go to a school like Lawrence Tech or like
Mm.
Michigan Tech, like up
Yeah.
in the UP. It was an option certainly, but like, I came from a lower middle class family and I couldn't even comprehend the, I mean, 12 years ago, I think college might have been $20,000 a year instead
Hmm.
of like 40 or 50,000 now. I don't
Yeah.
even know what tuition is at a big school, but anyway, long story short, it was an insurmountable amount of money for me to comprehend. So I went to community college instead, kind of bounced around into different um, course paths or whatever.
Hmm.
And it was like maybe 2010. Yeah, it was 2010 because that was the year that, funny enough, my first like experience with editing software came to be, and that was uh, a copy of Sony Vegas
Oh
that I
yeah.
found because I was making Call of Duty
Okay.
montage
I was
videos
gonna
with,
wonder because that was like
yeah.
the my first introduction was like people on YouTube were like showing. I was looking up how to edit stuff, and like all I could
Hmm.
find were people showing like effects that only Sony Vegas had that you could make like your Call of Duty
Oh,
montages with.
oh, dude,
Yeah.
all kinds of awesome title like with
Hmm.
lens flare, like
Great
it's
transitions. Yeah.
essentially like iMovie, like
Hmm.
like pixel distortion, flip from one shot to another, kind of,
Hmm.
what is now extremely rudimentary
Yeah.
stuff in After Effects. But at the time, I was like 19 or whatever, and this was like mind blowing stuff. And Call of Duty videos were in like machinima and stuff like that in the like earlier days of like gaming on YouTube. It seemed really cool, and because like playing video
Hmm.
games was what I spent the bulk of my time doing, I was like, this would be like cool. I didn't want to be like a professional gamer, but I thought the editing aspect of this was like a fun possible career path
Right.
because I thought at the time, well, I'm like trying to figure out this editing stuff on my own. Obviously, like people edit TV shows and like movies. You
Hmm.
watch the Oscars or whatever as a kid, and you see like best editing, and it's like, okay, well, I know this is a word. Let me look
Yeah.
up what this means. And it just so happened that there was a digital media or like digital video editing class uh, at the community college that I was at, and it was over the summer. And about to go into the fall, um, registration period. So
Mm-hmm.
everything just kind of fell into place where I decided to, you know, try my hand at this editing class. Uh, turns out like absolutely hated using Avid. I don't know if like the school's computers or like the file server where the like footage was stored or whatever. It was all just like so slow and so painful that even on my little rinky dink, high school graduation money budget
Mm-hmm.
laptop, I had a better experience doing that. So I was like, well, what else do they have here? This was fun, but frustrating for the wrong reason.
Mm-hmm.
And the teacher was like, well, there's After Effects, which is like kind of like editing in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Editing
Um,
with like steroids on top, if that's all
right,
you're using it for. Yeah.
right. Yes. And it's most like putting, little baby, toy blocks
Mm-hmm.
together. Yes, you can edit in After Effects, but like it's supposed to do so much more. So learning that was cool. And then they were like, well, we don't really have anything else, but like there's this other program called Maya, a 3D animation
Yeah.
program. And I was like, well, I don't know what that is, but like, okay, let's try that. So then I went from editing in Avid to the After Effects class. Then the next semester I tried out Maya. And from there it was like, okay, this is pretty sweet.
Mm-hmm.
I like this. It reminded me of like playing with Lego and like learning how to 3D model was like
Mm-hmm.
a super awesome addictive thing for my brain to latch onto as like a really fun time sink as opposed to just hammering away 6 hours of search and destroy
Yeah.
like ranked whatever in Call of Duty. So that was a really nice way to spend each summer. And then I want to say it was probably 2012 is when I found someone posted a GIF of basically the result of a Nick Campbell GSG
Mm.
tutorial
Mm-hmm.
onto the Maya subreddit and was like, hey, like,
Mm.
what modifier would I use? Like, because they're not called effectors,
Right.
it's like the bend modifier or whatever, like some like spiraling helix DNA thing or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And they were like, they the only comment on that thread was just the link to the Cinema 4D like Nick's tutorial, and I was
Oh.
like, well, I don't know what Cinema 4D is, but like I'm savvy on the internet and whatever. And then I spent the summer, finishing Maya,
Mm-hmm.
uh, translating what I could, having learned like, okay, this is how you should like set up your scene structure to like be a little bit organized, and like this is how you navigate, all with like the mouse buttons to like, tumble around and navigate, and like that stuff that like um it's almost like hard to Google because you're so uninformed.
Right.
Like if you imagine just picking up Cinema 4D for the first time, like, okay, what are you gonna do? Like click the cube button
Mm-hmm.
and then what? Okay, you make the cube, you see the three colored axis. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I can like move it around. Like now what?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't. That's not how I learned 3D because I learned it in a classroom context of
Mm.
like, okay, kids, today we're gonna like start making a desk. And
Right.
it's like, okay, well, like you model like the desk surface and like you do a couple extrusions or like a bevel or whatever. Okay, now we're gonna build the legs, so that the like table has something to stand on. It's like,
Yeah.
it's a classroom, so it's like you're walked through like what to do.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I think that like that's like something that a lot of people are really like it's a scary thing to jump in. I always found it super fun and like there was like a childlike wonder of jumping into like programs, but it's kind of hard to explain to someone how to get into it because everyone kind of has a different path. But I think that, a tried and true method definitely for me is always like just consume a bunch of tutorials and be able to like replicate those, and then like after a while you're like it's like learning a language and you eventually like associate things, and when you want to execute against your own ideas you just kind of like piecemeal a bunch of things from all these tutorials and you go back to them and you're like, what was the thing that I had to do to get this? All right, cool, I had to hit these couple of buttons, and then you can make this monster of a thing. It's like now your own thing, definitely ripped from all these other like few ideas. And that's kind of like where the beauty of like Grayscale Gorilla was that it was like super rudimentary stuff. They didn't like jump in too hard. Like he was like, we're going to take the sphere and we're going to like learn how to light it. And like, oh, I accidentally learned like lighting fundamentals. Oh, I accidentally learned
Hmm.
like camera like position fundamentals. And then you can just piecemeal all of those after, I think I like devoured the entire website's like catalog in like a couple months. And then I was like, oh, cool, I can like actually make my own stuff after this. And that's kind of how I like was able to get like running in cinema. And then you obviously have like much more like in-depth questions, but now you're able to like Google them, and before you
Hmm.
just had no idea like what even to ask or like where to search. But
Right.
yeah, I
Like
think that's cool.
if you were to open up Cinema 4D as a complete beginner and just think, I mean, it's a completely random thing I'm pulling off the top of my head, but it's like, how do I make a slinky? It's like, okay, like if you or me, it's like, all right, well, I might start with a helix
Mm-hmm.
spline. You put that into a sweep to turn it into geometry. Okay, cool. Like, well, if we want to animate it, like, a bend deformer might be a good place to start. But
Mm-hmm.
like, if you were starting out from scratch and you didn't even know what any of these words meant, you didn't know how to plug any of the stuff in together, like you don't know what you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and thus you can't even Google search, or you ask on a forum, or you make a Reddit post or
Right.
whatever, and you get flamed
Yeah.
for being a noob, and it's like, okay, that's not fun. It's
Mm-hmm.
discouraging, and people kind of drop out of being interested in it or whatever. So for me, yeah, I really I feel like I benefited from having the classroom experience
Mm-hmm.
of being walked through lessons. And obviously it's like it's a school environment, so like they're incentivized for you to like pass
Mm-hmm.
because they want you to keep taking more classes and like make it through the program and whatever. And so the teacher's there to help you, and if the teacher's busy, you've got like your neighbor who's sitting at the computer next to you, and you're like, hey, like I saw you like have this like shadow, like how'd you do that or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And so uh, I learned enough in Maya, taking 3 maybe 4 classes over like a year and a half, that I would learn Maya in the day and say like, okay, like eventually we get to character stuff or like rigging a skeleton like with bones or whatever, and it's like cool. It would suck to have to learn that completely from scratch, especially like in 2013, 2014 time period Vimeo,
Mm-hmm.
where there's not like a MoGraph mentor or a
Yep.
School of Motion or whatever, like a full course, which is essentially a school replacement. Um, it was just like whatever tutorial someone decided to make and post. You were at the mercy of learning whatever was available. If you didn't have the patience to sit there and like click and like read the documentation, or just sit there and experiment, like what order do I click these buttons in? You spend 45 minutes and then it's like, okay, now the thing works. What was I doing?
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I'm really happy that I stumbled my way through that path, learning Maya during the day, and then learning cinema at home, just translating whatever I learned. Okay, this is the bend modifier. This is how I use the bend deformer or
Right.
whatever. Um,
Did you
so kind
find
of
that like did you find it easier when like you went to like you found like cinema easier to work in, even though you were like learning more traditionally like how to use Maya? Or is that like
Oh, yeah, definitely, and that's just the nature of the two programs, I think.
mm-hmm.
Um, a Probably 2 years after I finished attending that community college, they actually switched the intro to 3D course from Maya to Cinema,
Hmm.
and that was like partially, as I was on my way out, that was kind of like my suggestion to the teacher who, like the head of the kind of 3D class, because there was like probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 adjuncts and teachers total. So it was really easy to like communicate and like say like, oh, this is what I did. And like, like if I ran into a problem in cinema, my teacher was like awesome, and he was willing, even though he'd never had used cinema, he like, installed like a teacher's copy of it or whatever, and like tried to figure out whatever, and translate his like advanced Maya knowledge to
Mm-hmm.
cinema to then try to help me, which was really cool. So, but
I
yeah,
mean,
to,
how
to answer your to answer your question, like cinema is a program where you actually can, with enough practice, like click on the cube and then click on the rotate tool and like
mm-hmm.
stumble your way through it. Whereas I personally feel like Maya with like you have to like open the project, you have to start a project file, you have to do like set folder thing, which like makes this like folder structure so that
Mm-hmm.
like if you want to have textures, those go to the right place. If you want to have like a cached simulation or whatever, like that has a place. And like
Mm-hmm.
as far as I was aware or like what I was taught, if you're like not doing this stuff correctly, you like can't even use Maya, which maybe that was like fabricated or like the truth was stretched a little bit just
Yep.
like to reinforce like good habits.
Mm.
But in any way, I was happy to be taught Maya and then teach myself cinema in that order because uh, it made me a little bit more diligent of an artist, and maybe kind of skewed me a little bit more into like a technical direction,
Mm-hmm.
which is like how now, many years later, I like sort of leaning into that. Getting further into my career, I am like excited by, problem solving tough challenges on
Mm-hmm.
projects with studios and stuff, as opposed to like, wholly uh, unrestricted like wild creativity.
Yep.
Like that's just, I don't think that really reflects itself in like my portfolio. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit, you know more kind of by the book, standard
Yep.
3D. In my personal work, I like to lean a little bit into like concept art kind of ish,
Mm-hmm.
um, stuff, but I'm not like creating some never seen before like mind blowing, um, like visionary thing, which is like, that's fine. Like I don't, I'm happy with where I am. Uh,
Yeah, I think that that's also something is that um, kind of not having, kind of teaching myself cinema, I taught myself a lot of really not great habits because it was just me working in my own scenes. And like if I got bit by something, I was like, oh, yeah, I should remember, like, maybe I shouldn't just hit no on like the text folder when I bring something in. Maybe I should bring all these into one place so that I'm not like, burned by that later on. And then, going with what I had taught myself kind of or learned over the internet going into like my first internship and then seeing how like the actual production pipeline worked, I was like, oh, okay. So like I have to unteach myself all these like quick things that I was able to just like get stuff that was like, end result was fine. But kind
mhm.
of all those bad habits taught up to there was like, something that Maya is much more of like a standard in the industry, so it makes sense that they're not going to just like let you like willy-nilly just bring stuff in. But that barrier to entry also deters people, and that's why I think I see there's a lot of graphic designers that are channeled through this like cinema 4D avenue, just because it's like it lifts that all up. It's they're not trying to make a feature film or like a huge animated short. They just want to make something in 3D, and so
Mhm.
they can bring things in. Things are parallel to what they know. I think that that's what I liked the most was coming from After Effects, similar to you. Like I was like, oh, like a spline tool is like a pen tool. I was like, that makes
Mhm.
sense. Like, oh, these things make sense. So all of that stuff kind of translated enough. And I mean, I was coming from Element 3D in After Effects, so it was like the closest bridge that I could get there. But oh, we have someone in the chat here to spam fried pixels. Oh, I know that username. I'm the worst at putting James. Okay, worst at putting usernames to people that I know in real life. I think we have some other people up here. Is that probably Shitty Renders? Seamus, probably up there as
Probably.
well. But yeah, thanks guys for stopping by. Just getting into this here. Oh, we got a follow. Thank you. Yeah, those are super. I should update those animations that happen when you follow, because I made those like the first week I set this all up, and they're just like basic primitives that I spun around and made GIFs out of in cinema.
Yeah.
But those should probably be updated to like a brand standard or something. But yeah, so I think that that's a cool path. It's very similar to mine, except that mine happened kind of bridging going into college, and then sort of the same thing. So it sounds like your college was also a little bit smaller. Mine was too. Like it wasn't like this big, SCAD or like RISD sort of thing where I felt like I could, yeah, go to my teacher and like bend the entire class into like they were learning Lightwave, not Maya, and I was like, I'm just gonna try to do it in cinema. And he's like, okay, as long as you like finish the projects, like use
Mhm.
whatever thing you want. And so it's like, we're gonna sweep. You have to use a sweep, and I was like, cool, I'll make like a bottle or something. And I think that that was like, yeah, a structure of a class was the easiest way to learn cinema, because I don't know if I would have been as disciplined kind of to just like assign myself things other than like tutorials that I'd seen on like Grayscale Gorilla. But I think that that's it's interesting how much, everyone takes like a little bit different of a path to get to kind of where they are, but it seems to flow a lot of the same channels just due to like information that was available based on when they did it. So I'm curious to see what people's stories 10 years down the line, because there is just the curve of like information is just like advancing at such a high rate where it's like, yeah, you could just go to School of Motion and like never touch college or never go through any of that and still get just as quality learn like education from it. But the thing that I also liked, I'm curious if this was your case, like I liked the networking that happened out of college. Like I met a bunch of other creatives that way that I don't know I would have met online. Definitely easier to meet people online now, especially in like COVID times and with Slack channels. But kind of curious about what happened there. Like, did you have like a lot of classmates that were also in the same kind of digital space, or were you sort of like the only one doing that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in a classroom of everyone's like there to learn Maya or intro to Photoshop or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, it's like, okay, everyone's there doing all the same thing. So it's like, you might talk to the person who's sitting next to you or whatever. And now many years later, I have like a really tight group of, 6 friends from school. Uh, we found each other, in 2013 going into 2014 ish. We all sort of like collided. Um, Here and there, we'd had like, oh, this person and that person have a class together,
Mm.
me and someone else have a class together. But then we all kind of came together in our advanced After Effects class,
Mm.
which like that like was introduced into the curriculum like part way like midway through all of us happening to be there. And those are like my now closest friends and the other members of that animation collective that I'm a part of called Box Fort here
Yeah,
in
I'm, I'm
Detroit.
I'm curious to hear about kind of how that started. It's kind of a known big thing now that like you are like one of the starters of that, and that it's kind of a cool thing to happen in a place where it's not, motion isn't as well known. I mean, there's like the the big hubs of like New York or like
Hmm.
London or LA, but you've kind of like forced Detroit to be a big hub as well that people still like think about. So I'm curious like how that all started and kind of where that grew out of.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm definitely not going to take credit for the entire thing or
Hmm.
even hell, like most of it, but the core of us, meeting, becoming friends, working together on projects in the advanced After Effects class, because the final, like basically the last like third of that semester was a group project. So
Mm.
we all like jumped together, like kind of realizing like, hey, I try really hard on these projects because I'm here and I give a damn, and so do you. So like, I want to work with you when it comes to the group project because we got to pick our teams. We weren't assigned by the teacher or whatever. So at first it was 4 of us, and then we like started like a Facebook messenger group chat or whatever so that we could communicate and like work together over Skype or Hangouts, whatever at the time, like on the weekend, work on classwork,
Hmm.
and then we stayed friends as we sort of finished that semester. We all happened to get jobs over the course of like one semester's amount of time, like whether it was like our first internships or getting hired at our each of our first like MoGraph studios.
Hmm.
So that was cool, and then we lumped in uh, another one of our friends from the school, but he had graduated like maybe 2 years prior. So it's like we knew of him, but during school we didn't know him. He winds up being one of the 4 of us, his coworker. So it's like, okay, now we're 5 like people in the group chat, and then um, another friend, popped in. So then we were like 6, and I think we attended F5 in New York, the um, motion graphics conference
Mm.
in 2015. That was kind of like our first big outing together, like as friends, traveling, figuring out this like MoGraph networking thing, like, you know, being fans of like bigger name MoGraph artists or whatever at the time. And like, oh, so and so speaking, like it's going to be so cool to see them
Hmm.
on stage or whatever. And like having that twinkle in your eye when you're, you know,
Yep.
younger and into your career. So like that was really cool. We stayed really tight knit. And then that same summer is when I want to say I want to say that same summer is when our other friend Julie, who runs MoGraph Mondays
Mm-hmm.
in Detroit, which is a like a once a month meetup thing. Sometimes it would be at like a cafe, or it would be at a specific studio who would be willing to host us or whatever. And so that's where we met Julie, and we met the started to meet the rest of the motion graphics community here in Detroit, because like as you're saying, you wouldn't expect Detroit to be a studio or a city where there's probably a dozen studios, and
Mm-hmm.
if you pressed me, I could probably name 50 to 100 artists like who are here. And like sure, that's like you know thinking of every name on the list and compiling it into like one big community. But like sometimes when we have a MoGraph Mondays, and it's like you know whether it's like convenient timing, it's a nice time of the year, the weather's good, or it's at a cool studio or whatever. But like these events can you know sometimes get to like 100 people, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes more if it's like kind of the holiday one or whatever. Um, and so yeah, there's a thriving community here, and I'm going to attribute most of that to Julie for bringing us together. And like bouncing around from studio to studio over the last 6 years is a really good way to get introduced to essentially everyone who's here, who either does keyframes or draws or works with polygons,
Yeah.
whatever flavor of motion graphics they're into. And so that was like really inspiring to continue to meet more people and to figure out like what my interests are, or to as I was working full time and starting to like find my way of like what's going to be next. Am I going to move um, to a bigger market, or am I going to go freelance, whatever. Like people helped me um, come to that conclusion, or give me confidence, or
Mm-hmm.
inspire me. um, and turns out there's a really awesome network of studios here, and that's sustained me like, really well for the first year and a half of being freelance. And then now the bulk of my work comes from places out of state, just as I've like sort of personally grown. But like yeah, I mean, we're doing our thing with Box Fort. We worked on the titles for Half Res, which was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of fun a year and a half ago. Trying to establish ourselves, put us on the map. You know, it's as a freelancer, like I'm sure you and me can both sympathize on like, okay, you're on a job, and it's like 4 weeks or whatever, and then it's like week 3, and you're like, okay, what's next? Like, am I booked? You
Mm-hmm.
know, am I gonna like have a month off unexpectedly because no one emails me, or like cold emails don't work or whatever? What am I gonna do? Well, what we try to do in box fort is when a couple of us have that time off, we like just sit there and like sketch something up or storyboard a little something here or there, and we just try to put our idle time into something together, and try to over time build ourselves up a name, so that maybe if we want to pitch stuff like as a studio, like where it's like, hey, we're going to have 4 freelancers working on this super awesome project and run it from start to finish. Like, that's a cool value proposition. It's obviously a lot of work, and like with that
Mm-hmm.
comes more budget and all that. But like, hey, it's a thing to build towards, as opposed to just doing the solo grind as a freelancer.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, I don't know about you, but for me, it's like I don't know when this is going to end. I mean, I hope like a long time from now, but
Mm-hmm.
can't guarantee that.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad idea to, in the back of your mind at least, I don't want to call it an escape plan, quote unquote, turning into a studio, but like it's a plan
Mm-hmm.
at least. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, myself, and I feel like a lot of artists kind of in this space are like inherently introverted, or or extremely extroverted. It seems to go one way or the other. And I find that like, I'm introverted, so my default is to, I can do this as a solo artist and I can like be freelance on my own. But you're really kind of, stuck out to dry if a lot of things don't start happening after, a booking, and you're kind of in a dry spell, and maybe your emails aren't coming back. It's a lot easier to kind of like have somewhat of a network somewhere, and like definitely having people in a physical space to kind of, when you're not booked, you can still go into the office and still have like sort of a semblance of like to be productive. Whereas, I know sometimes when I'll like not be booked, it's like so tempting just to, play video games for like an entire week, and you're like, I really should have probably been working on like a project or something. But if you had other people there, it'd be like, a little bit more accountability, which I think is kind of a key to keeping yourself motivated, keep going. But then even on the other side of that, you have a ton of networking people there to like, your name will probably come up if you're in the room and they're like, oh yeah, Billy's kind of not been on something for like a week or so, I can shoot it over here. And that's kind of the reason that someone, artist that we both know, and kind of someone who was like part of, would be my Box Fort crew from college, is Aaron Covrette, kind of like ushered me into the MoGraph Slack and was like, this is where everyone hangs out. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like this is a digital way to kind of have like a big space for like, staff people, but a lot of freelancers too, to kind of like just go in there and have like the water cooler sort of area. So even if you are like stranded alone, working from home remote, you can still kind of have the people to like talk to. There's like a jobs posting area. You can still kind of be in the know and kind of still have somewhat of a network, even if you don't have a physical space to go to. But I think that that's been a huge learning part, is that you could go solo. You could definitely do that, but it's a lot easier to have a network, and try to network and like keep that alive and flourishing. But it was always such a cool idea to see a lot of freelancers kind of build up a space, especially in an area where it wasn't as common, and like an area that not many people would like first like point to as like, oh, this is where like the MoGraph's happening. But I think now it's definitely on the map a lot more, especially just due to what you guys have done and kind of the work. I know that I kind of learned a lot more about Box Fort from the half-res titles of like, oh, this place did it. And I was like, is it a studio? And I was like, oh no, it's a bunch of freelancers that like put together this awesome thing and like really showed like initiative. And I think that that's something that definitely speaks volumes. You can do a personal project, but doing something at the level where it could have been a studio is definitely a big statement to kind of your ability to execute on ideas and like storyboard, concept, do the whole gambit of like what someone might hire you for. And I think it was a cool showcase of that. And I think it put, probably a lot more people onto you. I think we can go into sort of, I have one thing. Where did your handle come from? It's your handle on everything. What is that tied into, or is it totally random?
The name Gurnge, yeah. I think I might have mentioned this on Matt and Dave's,
Right.
The MoGraph.com podcast, probably the first time I was on there a few years back. But like, it's a very short answer. Gurnge, my name, or internet name, it was the name of the first character I made in World of Warcraft.
Okay.
In 2004. I was like 13. I'm sitting there in middle school in the family room, with the like Pentium 4, family computer, like in this like giant like media center, like cabinet.
It was like,
thing.
a nice weird like beige color wood.
Oh yeah,
mine was, and it was like nicely rounded, oddly, in every single area. It was very 90s.
And it had the little pull-out keyboard tray.
Oh, yep.
And everything was like the off-white gray color.
Was yours a gateway computer or no? Because those don't even exist anymore. But I remember specifically having a gateway computer was my first computer, and the cows and everything was like a big part of it.
Was Gateway the one that like it had like branding that looked like cows? Like it was like black and white splotches? Okay. I can't remember if ours was a Gateway. I remember it was a 2.2 gigahertz or 3.0 gigahertz single core Pentium 4. That's all I remember. I want to say we had 256 megabytes of RAM, and then I like saved up like all my Christmas and birthday money to get another 256 stick, which is like that gave me many more. Yeah. They gave me so many more frames per second, and wow. but yeah, no, I was just like sitting there, installed World of Warcraft because like my friend was talking about it at school, and uh, I was, at the character creation screen or whatever when you
Mm-hmm.
first log in, and I don't know if you know much about like Warcraft or anything, but just like for people listening, I made a Tauren warrior, so they're like these like giant like hulking like cow like like race of creature,
Hmm.
it with like big like bull horns and is a warrior, which is like the traditional archetype like fantasy character of like they wear like the big heavy armor and they like swing a sword.
Mm.
They weren't like a spellcaster or like sneaky or anything. So I was like, okay, I need to like come up with a word
Right.
or like a sound that like gives off whatever. Um, and so yeah, so yeah, Gurnge, the Tauren warrior on Skull Crusher. Uh, that was the server that I played on. Yeah,
You got to revive
that
that in like a personal piece of just like making a huge like ode to your like original Warcraft carrier would be very something up your alley, I
that
feel like.
that would be pretty dope. Yeah, I've seen some like Unreal Engine
Mm.
recreation or like fan inspired. Because like WoW even today is fairly similar graphically to when it came out,
Mm-hmm.
which is to say, not pleasant looking, unfortunately. So if you reinterpret, this awesome fantasy lore, because like Blizzard makes amazing like world
Right.
class cinematic artwork for like the expansion packs and the new games that come out. It's like holy crap, this looks so freaking amazing. And even back then it was like world class quality. And then you open up and it's like 36 polygons, like
Yeah.
just I mean, and it was a really big ambitious game at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, I played the first month it came out, um, so it was janky. Like it was constantly crashing. You had to sit there and wait like an hour to log in because there was like a queue. Like you had to wait in a line
Right.
to sign in because like otherwise the server would overload. So it was like, dude, it was brutal and it ran like complete ass on that computer, like with no graphics card. It was like just whatever dedicated iGPU. It was a complete struggle, but yeah, it was like some of the most fun memories I have even to this day, and that was like more than half of my lifetime ago at this
Mm.
point. Um, so yeah, that's just been like my internet name for the most part on everything ever since.
Because that was kind of, I find it so funny, the bell curve of that, where it was like, do not, under any circumstance, put your real name on the internet. And that was like
Mhm.
the golden rule of the internet for like the longest time when I remember getting on. And then, as artists, the weird thing is there's this weird carryover. It's like, oh, well, I want to be known as like myself as an artist. So
Mhm.
I should probably convert everything back to like my real name so that people know me and like can find me easily. And now,
Right.
like just recently with crypto art, people are like leaning back into like these like fake things, so it's like a little
Mhm.
removed from them and a little bit more mysterious and like fun and cool for like their art name. And I find it's like
Right.
everyone's just reverting back to then now being like anonymous and behind like fun, cool names. But I think it's always funny. Like we had like Cornelius on, and he had like Zomax was his like it's
Mhm.
always the same as like it was a username for some sort of game that then they picked and like stuck with. I was um yeah, I never played Warcraft. I was late to all of those because I didn't touch a video game until I was like 16 due
Mm.
to Midwest religious upbringing. Um,
Yeah.
so the first game I touched was Halo. Halo, I think it was three. Three had Guardian, right? The map, or was that two?
Yeah.
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 So Halo 3 Guardian, just multiplayer like local
That's
LAN.
that's not a bad first entry, man.
I fell in love, and so it's like
Mhm.
that's like my like fondest memories was the Xbox 360. Played a little bit of GameCube along with that, and like the original Call of Duties on there. But yeah, so I didn't really have like a big thing. It was like my friend would bring over his Xbox, so I didn't ever have to create. I was always just like the secondary of whatever he was, and so it's just like
Right.
I didn't have a fun little internet name. But yeah, Halo, first love, continual love, coming out this year, maybe, possibly. Super excited about that. But yeah, that's always funny to find the origins of those sorts of things that like carry through an artist thing. It's like they're known as both, but It's always like on Slack and different stuff. It's like, why? But that has nothing to do with
Hmm.
your name. Whereas my stuff has always been my full name, just because it's like I kind of joined all of that stuff when it was like more socially acceptable to have that
Right.
as like your screen name.
Yeah, I'm lucky in that, um, you know, I'm 29, so I was raised. I was like just old enough to like understand what like AOL like Messenger and stuff
Mm-hmm.
was, like it, like having access to that, or like having friends that had access to that or whatever. But thankfully, we didn't have a home computer until I was the age of like Warcraft. So I missed out on like having, Skater Boy 14,
Mm.
as the username or whatever, which I'm like really glad of.
Yep.
From like either AOL or like MSN, like chat room days. Like I missed that phase of the internet due to my age.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got into like gaming, where like you wouldn't want to be Skater Boy 14 on World of Warcraft.
Right.
You want like a
Big.
fantastical,
Yeah.
like a cool name, or
Mm-hmm.
like some of my other character names were like Black Valor, or like Kaleidoscalp,
Mm-hmm.
and like, you know like cool, like, or
Yeah.
like, I had a warlock name that was like Tormentor, which was like
Mm-hmm.
sweet because like warlocks are like evil mages.
Right.
So it's like, oh, like, all right, that's really, cool or whatever. And like, um and then yeah, like as you're saying, transitioning into like, okay, now I'm an adult and I like want to be like respectable,
Yep.
and also for SEO purposes,
Mm-hmm.
I want people to be able to find me. So like, I'm thankful that, yes, very few people can pronounce Gurnge, like if they, like don't know, because most people say it's like Gurngi,
Mm.
which, and I'm not like a stickler about it or
I'm
whatever,
also
but
dyslexic, so I always just pronounce it as garage. There's no
it's
similar
close
letters,
enough.
but just I just always it's just garage in my head. I was like, I should just
Yeah,
have him say it first, and then
there's enough
we all
G,
know.
there's enough G's
Yeah.
in it, It's like, hey, like I'm, you know, uh, but right, as a word, like, or as a name to like go by, it's like thankfully unique enough.
Mm-hmm.
um, as far as I'm aware of, it's not present anywhere else on the internet really in any big capacity except on Twitter, because I have an underscore.
Mm.
um, Unfortunately,
Yeah, for
somebody
the
made a
money.
Twitter. I've tried, dude. I've tried to DM that account. It was made a month before me
Oh wow.
getting on Twitter. I want to say it's like a lady in like Indonesia or like the Philippines or something. Because if you go into Twitter and you type at Gurnge, because I'm at underscore Gurnge
Mm-hmm.
as like me on Twitter, but if you go to her thing, it's like all capitalized, all weird, and like there's like kind of the
Oh
Tumblr
yeah.
esque like tildes and like stars and like
Privated
ampersands and
account.
stuff.
I see a ton of
Oh,
people from the MoGraph community accidentally tagging that person.
oh yeah, no, I'm sure that person probably went private because of me establishing my
Oh yeah.
presence on the internet and being mistweeted. I really messed up not being at Gurnge underscore, because at least if you type at and then GERNGE, it's not gonna pick me because I have an underscore. You
Mm.
know, it's
Yeah.
gonna. Whereas if I was Gurnge underscore, it would at least show up, and people would be able to pick my picture. Um, if they cared, they could still
Mm-hmm.
mess it up or whatever. But like, yeah, that's really the only fault, quote unquote, I've made in terms of like the name. Um, so yeah, I'm really happy that it's a weird word. It doesn't come up anywhere else on the internet as far as I'm aware of. It's not like a city name or like a country. I don't believe it's a word in any other language,
Mm.
which is also very spectacular for it being a
Yeah.
completely made up thing that like, a
Teenage
third
you was like very
a th-
luckily making like the best brand decision for you.
right, like I
Yeah.
really I really want to thank 13 or 14-year-old me for like sticking with that. It's also short, you know. Yes, it's weird to pronounce, but it's not like, like a really verbose or uh like alphanumerically challenging word. um so yeah, I don't know, it's just like words and like names, usernames, display names, like all that's like really interesting, because yeah, if you get big enough, and this is like maybe like a cool just like talking topic, but like not everyone can just be people.
Hmm.
Like obviously Mike works really hard and has been doing it for a really long time to like just be able to go by Beeple,
Right.
like on anything he wants. And as you were saying, like with the NFT, like crypto art space, like kind of resurfacing, like it's also kind of cool to like maybe not go by your name again. So that's like, a side benefit for him. But
Hmm.
like, yeah, most motion designers, like we just use our name because like if you know my name, at least you'll be able to find me. Whereas
Hmm.
like if somebody knew, um, like if somebody met me at a studio like Billy Chitkin and they like just Google my name, like if I don't have a website or if I don't have, whatever like decent SEO setup, like they might not be able to find me. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's like it's interesting. Like, yeah, as a brand decision, do you go by your name? Do you not? Um,
Yeah, I've kind of switched it. Just I joined a lot of stuff and like had you know early Twitter accounts that were like not my name, but also aren't like tied to art in any way. And I think when a lot of artists like decide, there's that point where like their Instagram converts into like had like random photos and everyone's just like, what is Instagram? But then like there was definitely that time like mid 2000s, late 2000s where it's like, oh, this is a portfolio. And so it's like it switched over and I was like, I should probably snag all of these usernames just anyways, just because like no one should have my full name at least. Like there's no reason for them to have it. So I just grabbed them on, everything I could. I grabbed, my last name as just like a website for my portfolio just because I was like,
mhm,
no one should have this or like there's no reason for anyone to have this. So I'll get all of these and like set all this up. And then, I'm kind of like, Twitch for some reason there was already someone at my long full name. But then even for that, which was weird, and I like reached out to Twitch. I was like, hey, they haven't done anything. Can I have this? And they're like, not technically until like a long time. And I was like, whatever. So I just switched to Taracks, which is just my last name and like my
mhm,
first letter, which is like decent enough. No one ever has that, and so that's kind of been also the crypto art. I've just like, it's for my Twitch, which is like a little bit more like full digital. I'll switch it there too, but more portfolio, like full brand, freelance encompassing entities will just like full name is easy because A, probably available, B, it's easy to find, and like yeah, SEO is definitely a big part of it, and you can kind of also guide SEO in different directions where it's like, oh, maybe I don't want my crypto art and my streams going as much to like when people go to recruit me, so these go under
mhm.
a different name, and then big portfolio pieces go under the first one. So yeah, I think that that's it's an interesting thing, especially a weird conundrum. Social, just as a platform for artists in general, is a tricky space to kind of move around, and people take a lot of different approaches to being, on one side very vocal and very like opinion based, as well as art based, and then other people that like literally just kind of post art, and that's about it. And it's just a place where that stuff lives. But I think it's always more interesting to have a personal connection to people that you follow. And I think that's where something kind of like this was birthed out of the idea of like, I have a decent connection to a bunch of people that I never thought I would have a connection to. So I might as well kind of in the small little realm that I have, get them on to kind of hear more backstory into them because as famous as people are in our community, it's still very dwarfed in comparison to like actual notoriety, and so not many
Mhm.
people get the chance to go through their history of like where they came from or how they got to what they're doing. I thought it would just be a cool way to time capsule a lot of these, and so I just started with a lot of people I followed, and no one said no. So I still have so many more people to get through, which is fun, but also a little bit daunting. But it was really fun last year. Kind of at the end of it, looking back at the catalog of like, wow, that was like, I didn't mean to start a podcast, but I accidentally started a
Yeah.
live interactive podcast, which was a cool thing to do. Um, I think that yeah, we could get into kind of how we met. Sort of around the same space of me getting into the Slack community, the MoGraph Slack. I saw you, constantly answering questions and being sort of the person to pull in for hardware questions, for Redshift questions, for Octane questions, like any rendering questions, hardware. It was like all over the place, like cinema questions for sure. You and there's like, it's funny that there's like, I think, maybe 1,000, maybe less than 1,000. I don't know. Maybe it's less. Maybe it's like 500 or so people in that Slack, but the amount of
Mhm.
active people is like very pared down from that, and so
Yeah.
you can definitely start to recognize names, and you were like one of the people I saw there. Then I went to, I think it was NAB, um, and we just kind of like hung out in similar circles. And it was like very in passing.
Hmm.
That I think that we like talked to each other. We would watch a talk at the Maxon booth, and like then go hang out somewhere else with like similar networks. I think I was I just kind of like went where Aaron Covret went, and then you were like in the same circles as that, and then
Hmm.
couple times of that at different conferences, definitely chatting online as well, and then just this past year we had a chance to work on a piece together at a studio here that I was working at, Perception, as a freelancer, and I got dropped into a project that had no real warning about, and then I just kind of like got plopped in, and then I was like, oh cool, Billy's here, and then a couple other people from the MoGraph Slack too. There was Patrick Laterno was
Hmm.
also there. Um, yeah, was it Patrick?
It
Yeah,
was Patrick Goski.
Goski. Get those two
Yeah.
confused all the time. They're both
They're
active on the Slack.
they're both Canadian
Yeah.
Patricks. So
um,
easy mistake.
yeah, but he was our sculptor, and you were our project lead. Um, I can even share. We have the link here ready, but we can talk a little bit about that project and kind of what you were up to last year, and kind of when we got into the swing of things on this project.
Yeah, so this was a fun one. I was introduced to Johnny at Perception.
Mm-hmm.
He's a executive creative director
Mm-hmm.
or like a chief creative director. Apologies for forgetting his
He's the
title
big man, big
specifically.
creative director man.
Yeah, he's the guy. If you want to work there, it's a good thing to know him or to
Mm-hmm.
get introduced to.
Nice guy,
So
great guy.
yeah, no, it's super fun, and we had some like cool kind of introductory chats, talking like half car, half MoGraph
Mm-hmm.
stuff, which was
Oh yeah,
cool.
because
And
he's a big car guy, and you're a very big car guy as well.
I'm getting into it more, like I've got a cool fun car now.
Mm-hmm.
It was very to me it was very new. Like within a month of getting it is when we really got into touch in like September.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was like fun, and he kind of pitched me saying like, hey, we've got two opportunities here that I would be a good fit for. He was like, one's like car stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, you got my attention. And then he's like, the other one's like game stuff, and I was like, oh,
Mm.
well, I do car stuff quite a lot for fun, so let's try the game thing, which might have like caught him off guard,
Mm.
maybe not, I don't know. Um, and so yeah, the project was a trailer or like an announcement for Legends of Runeterra, which is a, if you know the uh, internet card game Hearthstone, which is a Blizzard property. Legends of Runeterra is essentially uh, a pretty similar story, but for the game League of Legends. And so I had played League a little bit in like the early 2010s, kind of like with some of like my World of Warcraft
Mm.
friends, and then also some of my high school friends that I reconnected with slash lived with when I moved out of
Mm.
my parents' place for the first time. So that was like, oh, okay, like I know some of the characters
Right.
in this deck. I haven't played this game specifically, but it's like this is stuff that I know. Um, and that was like surprising because I guess like before I knew what it was, I was like, oh man, like I don't know if this is going to be something that I'm like connected to or like I'm going to care about, because like I'd agreed to work on this for 10 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and like that's typically longer than I usually sign up for, or like studios usually reach out to me. It's usually in like the 3 to 6 week range, not 10. So I was a little at first I was like scared. Like the first day, like I said, like, yeah, like I'll jump on, and then like the weekend went by and I was like, oh man, I don't know what I just signed
Yeah.
up for. Because I hadn't like seen the deck, or I hadn't,
Mm-hmm.
seen like any sort of schedule, or like didn't know like who the other team members would be. And then all that stuff kind of started to fall into place the first like 2 weeks. Um, and then you hopped on, and I was like, oh dang, Isaac's dope. Like, this will be cool, and I know that like you and me are like friendly and like have a similar enough background that like it was really comfortable to communicate with
Mm-hmm.
like one another, and um, like it's like you're working on a hard project and it's like, hey man, I'm having this issue with like this like simulation or like a cache or like, hey, you sent me this file and like it doesn't work
Hmm.
because of like X, Y, or Z thing.
Which
Like
was
did
often on this
oh yeah,
project.
no, it was like every 3 hours
Yeah.
you and me were spiraling into a deeper discussion with one another. And it's like if you have to do that with somebody that you either suspect or know has like a negative disposition towards you,
Mm.
like which sometimes happens, it's like I'm not out to try to make enemies, but it's like if I have to annoy somebody constantly because something went wrong, I would rather annoy my friend.
Hmm.
And that was like a really huge relief. Jamming on the like what turned into be like a really intense project the final month. Um, and so it was like that was when we really started being in almost like minute by minute or hour by hour communication. Whereas like the first month that you were on, it was like I was in my sandbox, you were in your sandbox, and we didn't really communicate a whole lot.
Hmm.
And
It
then I
was
was like,
interesting like getting into it because like yeah, I was like, oh, I know this person, but I also don't like know this person enough to be like, big enough like into kind of where it got towards the end where it was like, yeah, almost like nearly every like 10 minutes it's like, hey, this is happening. And that was kind of also out of necessity, just of like how manic that got towards the end of like how we were working on things, and like things just had to be like that constant of an update because like minutes lost were like detrimental to the final thing getting out. But like in the beginning stages it was like very, yeah, very siloed, and it's like, we would get in our meetings and like it was like, oh cool, it's like nice to be able to talk to this person. But like I think after a while of us realizing like, oh, we should be in much closer contact because this is getting like, it's building up to be a big thing that we're gonna have to like, it's just us to tackle a lot of these things. And like if we just
mm-hmm,
try to, like figure things out or keep things like to ourselves, it's gonna be a lot harder down the road to like just wait till a daily meeting to kind of like unload like, hey, here's all the things that are not working, and then just like try to figure them out over like an hour versus just like taking it off to the side on our own, just being like having our own Zoom calls of like, I don't know why, this isn't working for you, but like here we'll walk through it and we'll try to figure it out so that we can get this
mm-hmm,
like going. And I think that it's nice to also, I think back to your thing of like people that are just like nice or your friends, but also people that are like similar work ethic where it's like, it's not like I was like, it's always felt bad to like bug someone after hours, but like if it was someone that was like, they weren't like logging back on to like do this, it was like you knew that they were also just chugging away at like all their other
mm-hmm,
tasks that they had to do. It was a lot easier of like, okay cool, we can like, we both just want to get this like out and like to the best quality that we can. And it wasn't just like, oh, this person's like hopping back on after like logging out right at 7 or like whatever,
mm-hmm.
which is always kind of a, you don't know people's times or when they're working. But if you get in a lot closer like communication with them, it's a lot easier to kind of gauge those sorts of things. I feel like we got in a lot better rhythm. Battle buddies, yeah, that is a
Mm-hmm.
very true statement of yeah, you're both in the trenches, and it's a lot easier if you talk to each other than just like sitting there and just like putting your blinders on and like trying to just deal with your own stuff. It's a lot easier if you kind of share the load in both directions.
Yeah, and it wound up being something, uh, you know, stoked, to be able to wrap it up and get it to a point where no project is finished; it's just
Mm-hmm.
released.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the case with literally everything. Um, it is what it is. Obviously, you deliver the thing, and then you could spend another week on it. If
Mm-hmm.
you spent a day on it, you're like, man, I could spend 3 more days on it.
Yep.
If you spend 2 months on it, it's like I want another 2 months to fix all of the things that I wasn't able to get to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's just like you you do enough of those projects over your career, as you're sort of building up to that, and you figure out like, okay, this is how I like to work, and like meeting other people who like to work similarly. It's like it's a really big refresher. Thankfully, I'm on like another job right now where it's not as intense the hours, but everyone's like gung ho ness
Mm.
is like very like equatable to one another. So yeah, it's like really again, it's like another refreshing experience of like, okay, these are cool people. I'm happy to work with. Um, it is. for something that's like, okay, this is like fun, like while I'm doing it. It might be
Mm-hmm.
grueling, but like just, it's not uh, shingling roofs in like 100-degree, heat
Yeah.
in Florida or whatever. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to complain. Big picture stuff, because this is like a nice career field to be working in. To be honest, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to sugarcoat that in any way, shape, or form. And realizing like, okay, like as a child of the internet, uh, you know, having found my own access to this stuff is like, okay, cool. Like even when this stuff is at its worst, it's not like that bad.
Yep.
So, um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just fun. I think um, every opportunity to meet other people on projects is like super sweet. That's what I like the most about freelance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is like you never quite know what to expect, which for some people is probably going to sound scary, but for me, it's like this is a new set of problems to
Mm-hmm.
tackle. And like on the thing I'm on right now, my like little title or whatever in the deck is like technical director, and I'm like,
Mm.
ooh, that's a first. Like that's
Yeah.
fun. So it's like, hey, I'm having this issue where like I'm cutting from this scene to this scene, and like these things aren't lining up, and I'm like, all right, I just have to figure out how to make this work. Like
Mm-hmm.
other people will do other way cooler looking stuff in the graph editor, or like they'll figure something out with some UI element in post, like in After Effects or something, and like all I have to do is get them a null and like you know export this camera or whatever, or like solve this tricky thing of like, oh, I have to like transition from this thing to that thing, but like this light's not working, you know. I'm like, okay, I can solve that.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Like I
Yeah.
don't need to.
I find it so fun to do that stuff because I'm nowhere near smart enough to be like an engineer or like a scientist, but like I oddly know a bunch about this fake world, and like it's fun to be like an engineer in the fake world where you can like, that's where like, Houdini was like a fun thing. It's like I'm a mad scientist in the weird realm of like this digital world that I can like control and like build things on and invent things with no, need for actual resources or
Mhm.
anything, but you can, kind of get that like itch scratched of like I'm kind of, doing my own thing and like being a little engineer, but it's like in the most like basic,
Right.
not helpful forms of inventing things. But I definitely, yeah, I think that, we're all sort of problem solvers, and, being able to kind of, yeah, technical director was like something where a long time I thought that that's where I wanted to go, until I like honestly looked into it and I was like, just it goes back into being like a computer science person. Like if you get
Oh yeah.
high enough up the ladder, it's just like, oh, you're not doing the art things anymore as much. You're more just like strictly writing code for other artists to
Hmm.
use. And I was like, that's no fun. So it's
Yeah,
a it's a
I
it's a
can't do
great
any of that.
threshold. Yeah. Yeah, but I think that that stuff, at least on our project, was sort of the same thing. It was definitely a lot of work, but we also, because it was a lot of work because it was such a small team that was working on it, but that also meant we all got to touch a lot more parts of the project than you
Hmm.
typically would if it was like a big thing that like went out to a huge studio where you're kind of like the you're doing your one specific part, which was like very fun but also very daunting at the same
Hmm.
time, where it's like, you know being in control of like a lot of the simulations and like handing them off to you to be in control of all of the look dev for them was like a new experience. And like both of us were just like didn't know how to work, in that transfer. And like we made up, our very own system that like eventually
Hmm.
was like half working the way that we needed it to, and like got the job done. And it was kind of fun, yeah, kind of being the problem solvers on both ends, and both kind of having that like, I actually found out like a way better way to do this. And then you just, kind of add that in and kind of help make the project go better. And we were always being reeled in by, as we should, the creative direction of the project that was like, maybe we don't need to optimize this again. Maybe we can just go with what we have, and we will
Hmm.
focus that energy somewhere else. And it's definitely, yeah, it's good to have someone there to do that, because I think people like us will just constantly iterate until we like make like a nice streamlined thing that will work, the best way it can, and get all the kinks out of it. But sometimes you just have to run with like version 2 and get on to the next part, which is a learning experience that I'm still kind of, getting rid of the perfectionist and getting more into like make things mode is definitely a part of this whole kind of career that I'm more getting into. But it was nice to be able to work on a project with someone like you who has the same, love for that sort of stuff and that side of the career that we both work in. But yeah, so you've, I guess, been freelance. You weren't freelance the entire time of your career. When did you kind of decide to do that, and what kind of drove it? Was it the chase of new projects when you wanted them, or was it sort of other aspects that you didn't like as much about being staff?
Um, I mean, to say it in a half joking, half real way, the reason I'm freelance is the like black cylindrical trash can Mac Pros.
Okay.
Um, so I can explain,
I think I remember the story, but yeah.
um, yeah, like I was staff. I had two small internships immediately out of school where like this head um, uh, head of the media arts program or whatever was like, hey, like this small studio like wants an intern for 2 months or whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
go show up there. um, and I'd be like, okay, cool, I can go do that, sweet. What's next? Like go do another one. And then so the third internship that I wound up at was the place that I stayed for about 3.5 years.
Mm.
um, Transitioned to staff like maybe 6 months in, and like honestly my second week there I got thrown into a massive project. It was like a 4K by, no, it was like 6K by 2K, 13 minutes of content, uh projection mapping onto the front of a building, like the front of
Mm.
the DIA, like the Detroit Institute of Arts,
Yep.
for like late summer, early fall kind of like light and projection mapping themed thing called Delectricity. So
Mm.
like Detroit pont, like Detroit
Yep.
electricity, whatever. Um, so that was like an insane project. That was like my first like full from start to finish project as an intern, where I was like working like, I think I worked 24 days straight up until the day of like show day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like 12 plus hours a day or like
Yeah.
whatever, and I was like, this is nuts, but like, can you guys like hire me, like
Yeah.
that'd be rad. So they hired me, and then I was there for 3 months or 3 years, sorry, staff. um, and then yeah, like one fateful day, uh, it was a Sunday, and I was like working on this like pitch stuff that my boss asked me to, and I was using X Particles, the only copy of X Particles that we had, and I was using it at home, and I was like, okay, it'll be easy to work on it at home and then remote to the office computer when it's time to render, because that would be faster.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is as soon as I hit render, the machine locked up, and
Mm.
it was like not
Took the
responding,
license
like,
with it. Yeah.
yep. And so I had to drive to the office to turn that computer off, and like I had to cancel my plans that evening. It was a Sunday night. I was like going to go to a movie with my roommate, and I was like driving down there, and I was like, man, this blows. um, so I like put my month notice in the next morning, which was like scary to do, of course, but I gave myself a month to
Mm-hmm.
like, brush up my whatever my last demo reel was with like my
Right.
sort of daily, like my personal, like nighttime personal work, experimental project stuff, threw together like a website or whatever. And then yeah, I started freelance December 2017, and I had a job within a week of my full-time job ending. A week went by, and then I started a 6-week freelance project at an agency here, and I haven't looked back since. Um, so yeah, don't regret it in any way, shape, or form. Bless that Mac trash can for crashing that evening, because I wouldn't be where I am today had that thing not.
Yeah.
Um, in a silly, making light of at the
Mm-hmm.
time what felt like a very dramatic scenario of like
Mm-hmm.
driving down to the office on a Sunday night, like gripping my steering wheel, like all mad, like I'm gonna quit tomorrow, like now years later, it's like, okay, that was like honestly one of the best things that happened to me,
Right.
because now I have like a bunch of super awesome friends that I hang out with every day when outside of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
because for the most part we're sticking home these days. But like, yeah, for like 2+ years we've had a a super awesome time at our studio in Detroit. Like our space, we're not a company,
Mm-hmm.
box for it, but we have like a room that we all work outside of or work in together. And so, yeah, actually, like in a week, we're moving because our lease at our current
Mm.
office is ending. And yeah, like
No
in
more
a week.
tacos.
No, man, man, I'm so depressed. Yeah, so the schoolhouse, it was an old like Lutheran middle school or something in like the 60s or 70s, the building. Um, and it's just a bunch of cool MoGraph people, like the studio's Gunner and their sister company Hobbs. And then there's like a video production guy. He works for us, or like post production, whatever, named Gorilla.
Mm.
Um, and then us, and then there's like some painting people slash like UI slash whatever stuff. So it's like a whole cool community, like all packed into this little old rundown schoolhouse thing that we like were renting for like dirt cheap, and it was like a block away from this awesome Mexican grocery store named Honeybee, where like they serve tacos, enchiladas, tostadas, like you anything you want, you can get it for like $4 and then come home or come back to the office and like chow down. I'm gonna miss that. Really, really gonna miss that.
Do you guys know where you're moving to?
Yeah, I mean we have a new space. It's probably in the process of being painted this week or last week by the people that the new landlord or our new landlord. It's an existing space that did whatever for however many years, and they've owned it, and they're building up a couple properties in the area. So hopefully, like the neighboring building, which is all of this like block is owned by the same landlord company. Hopefully, Gunner and their company Hobbs or their sister company Hobbs, they'll be moving over. As a company, they have like a little bit more work to do, like with COVID,
Mm-hmm.
like rules and like regulation stuff. So like,
Yeah.
because we're just like a bunch of random people, like we don't have to like file paperwork or
Right.
whatever to like have OSHA, business, sanitation, whatever. We're all just like, okay, like I wear my mask, you wear your mask,
Mm-hmm.
like we both wash our hands, like cool, like whatever. If we need to be at the office at the same time these days, so. Um, Hopefully, fingers crossed, that doesn't last for too many more months
Mm-hmm.
of this year. And we'll get to party in the new space, which is like 2 or 3 times bigger.
Oh wow.
Um, so hopefully, we'll get to grow a little bit because we were limited to 8 people
Mm-hmm.
per the terms of our lease at our current slash old space. So it'd be a lot of fun to bring in some new box forters into the fold. But yeah, that was a long ramble. I went from freelance like all the way into like studio like
Yeah.
space.
Um, yeah. I guess we can get into another tangent, which is something that I've asked a lot of people, which is kind of just the question that I find interesting, because it's sort of changed more with being at home more and COVID and just different kind of working stuff. But like, what do you find that like constantly kicks you into creative flow when everyone will eventually go into burnout mode when you've just been at the computer for way too long, and it's even harder with us where you work in front of the computer and then you just go right into doing your own personal work in front of the computer, and you're like, wow, I've been
Hmm.
here for 14 hours of this day, I should do something else. Like, what do you find? I know that you guys at Boxfart are into, if I pronounce it right, the hacky sack is something that you
Yeah.
guys are into.
Well, we play a fair bit of hacky sack at the office, which is fun. It's like, all right, everyone, in 6 minutes, like, because it'll be uh you look at the clock and it's like 1:24 or like pick whatever
Mm-hmm.
random time, and it's like, okay, at 1:30, like get ready to RAM preview or like set off your IPR or like whatever, I'm 2D, you're 3D, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all right, everyone, like a couple minutes, we're gonna do a little hack sesh. Everyone, like, get ready if you got to go to the bathroom or whatever, like get a drink, like get ready, do your thing, and then we all just kind of mess around and have fun for a little bit, get up and like move, which is like really nice. I
Mm-hmm.
miss it a lot, actually. Um, it's probably been 2 months since I've been at the office. Like kind of lockdown started, stayed home for like a good 3 month stretch, and then I was at the office with like maybe one other person semi regularly for, I don't know, from like July to like, well, through our project at Perception. So that took me
Hmm.
into like November. So that was like a good stretch of like being back, but like there was almost no one else there. Um, so that was like cool, but like a bummer because I was like, well, like I'm not at home, but like I'm alone.
Hmm.
So it's like kind of like in some ways it's the negative of like both aspects because it's like
Yeah.
as a freelancer from your house, and I was too before we got our office, it's like, okay, you get like stir crazy, but then if you need to, you can like go kick back and like watch TV or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I mean, we have a TV and a couch like at the office, but like I'm not like signed into like Netflix or whatever there. So it's like I don't
Hmm.
even know like what episode of
Yeah.
whatever, like if I even wanted to like just unplug my brain for like an hour, if I had to like work really, like if I had to like do like a daytime shift and then
Hmm.
also like a nighttime shift, but I wanted like a break in the middle,
Hmm.
like I mean, what can I do? Like, whereas like at home, it's like you've got everything around you.
Right.
If you want to take a nap, like you go, hop into bed, whatever, set a timer on your phone, whatever.
No
Um,
one does that. No freelancer ever does that during the workday. I just want
no,
all the studios to know that. Never. Does not
no,
happen.
nope.
I am chained to this desk in this seat for the 10 hours that you pay me 100% of the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
That's
no, of
just
course.
on the record.
Um,
Yeah, but is there anything that you found kind of other, like now that you've been like solo during COVID times, like is it just like watching some movies, is it like going for a walk? You have cats, so is it just messing around with the cats for a bit?
yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a mix of any of those
Mm-hmm.
things. Usually, I just find myself alt tabbing over to Slack for a bit, or killing some time on YouTube.
Alt tabbing. Oh,
Which
Windows, that's how you like get to the new stuff. I never use that feature, but that's how you
Oh
get to
man,
like a new window.
yeah,
I
alt
should.
tab is like how you jump between programs. Um,
Okay. I should use that. I
uh,
should speed up my workflow, my off
l-
work workflow.
yeah, hell yeah. You just go right from Cinema right to whatever Chrome tab you had
Mm.
open. It's like I don't know where this is gonna
I just
take
get
me.
more monitors when I just want to keep all the things up all at the same time. That's all I do.
Oh right, yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like I definitely spend too much time on the computer. But over the last handful, well, more than a handful, but not quite a year worth of months, like I met a super cool person, and it's like awesome to have a partner,
Hmm.
like to share life with and
Right.
to like figure all that stuff out. And that's been like a really cool development in my life, which was like, okay, like, yeah, we met like during COVID, but it was like, okay, like you text for a couple weeks and it's like, are you cool? Like, I'm
Hmm.
working from home. Are you cool? Like, well, I'm working from home. So it's like, all right, like, I don't know, we like went to a park. It's like, okay, that was safe. Like, sweet. So that's been, a nice change of pace for like life, to unplug like way more on the weekends than I like
Yeah.
ever have for the last like 8 years. It's just like, yeah, I would work 9 to 5 at a desk, like pushing buttons in Cinema 4D,
Hmm.
and then I would go home or already be at home if I was freelance or whatever, and just continue to do that for another 8 hours or 12 hours or however long, which is like
Hmm.
super unhealthy. Like I have like really bad like wrist and arm problems, like from 2 decades of computer use, um, and so it's like not great. Yeah, and like Netflix or like popping some movies on or whatever is like cool. I definitely don't do enough of any of that because like having a super awesome computer means that you can play super awesome graphics
Mm.
games. So it's like, okay, like I got Cyberpunk like right when uh, the Perception job wrapped. It was like, okay, that job wrapped on like the 7th. Cyberpunk came out on the 10th. Dude, it was like perfect. I like spent like the next like 2 almost 3 weeks, and then it was like the holidays rolled around, like doing family stuff. Um, so that was like a cool break. I don't know. I guess I just my answer to that is like on a day by day basis, I'm
Hmm.
terrible in terms of balancing like my engagement, like computer use time. But like over month by month, it'll be like, okay,
Right.
well, right now I'm like grinding really hard on a personal project because I'm like in the zone. Then you wrap that up, then you take a break for, like, oh, Animal Crossing came out. So I was like, dude, I put like 200 hours in on the Switch, like the
Yeah.
month or 2 months that came out, like right when quarantine started. So like that was a really nice way to unplug for a bit.
Hmm.
And then like jobs pick back up or whatever, you a couple months on, a couple months off, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Because I'm always like working during
Hmm.
the day, or if I'm not booked, doing my best to do personal work from like the quote unquote 9 to 5 time.
Yeah.
Um, and then, taking nights or weekends or whatever, like, you know, either off or on if work's heavy. Um, so yeah, I would say I don't have a good answer. I definitely don't recommend it. I mean, I have to have like a special, like weird, crazy shaped mouse because like my wrist
Oh,
is like
I've been
is
thinking
like
about one of those, but I just get
yeah.
one of those like those goofy cushy things that like
Hmm.
helps your wrist when it lays there, and that's kind of because I like have you developed there's like a pad that like I now
Oh
have on
yeah,
my hand.
no,
Yeah, the
I've got
MoGraph pad.
I've
Just
like
so
I don't know
much.
if
Yeah.
the camera if it shows up on camera or not, but like that's my red spot like
Yep.
for like the
It gets
computer use. And it's like,
yeah.
is that a callus? I don't know.
I
Like,
don't know
is that
what
gonna
it is.
kill
It's
me?
like yeah. It looks like what my like dogs have like up their arm is like a
Hmm.
thumb right there. It just looks like you just develop that on your hand when you
Yeah.
like work with a mouse too much. So I got a pad at least that like helps it not like be inflamed, which it normally
Hmm.
gets like when I was working in studio at places and you just kind of like have to sit on the workstation they have, which is my number one favorite part about working from home is like I have my nice keyboard, I have my comfy mouse, I have like my nice chair. It's like but you're just like normally on like like a Mac keyboard on a PC with like a just default Dell mouse that's like
Yeah.
USB'd in. You're just like, dear God, I hate everything
Hmm.
that's happening right now. And it affects your workflow definitely. Like when you can be cozy and like there's no friction into the computer, it's like you just work
Hmm.
so much easier. But yeah, that's yeah, I would say I've held off on utilizing my PC for gaming because I like the only semblance of like non-guilt I have is that I'll flip the monitor to my Xbox input and like
Hmm.
something can render and I'll like play a couple games or like
Right.
throw it into my second view so I can still see it like rendering in picture viewer, but I'm
Hmm.
like I'm multitasking, look at me go.
Yeah.
It's not as bad that I'm now playing. I'll go play 2 hours where it's like I could have done something else or sent or just built another computer to render on, which you are very well versed in, as we
Yep.
found out on the project we worked on, where you were our mini render farm with however many GPUs you have full, or you had other people's computers as well, but it was like 14
Um,
GPUs that you were cooking all of our stuff on.
I'm trying to count how many I have. I've got I've got eight 1080 Ti's, three 3090s, and then three 2080 Ti's. Yeah, so I have 14.
Hmm.
Um, and plus other people in the room
So those
that
14 are yours, like those
I
are
own
think.
those. Yeah, I
Oh,
own
I
those
thought that was
four
like
computers.
across box for it. There were 14 GPUs to be
Well,
used.
across, if you add in other ones, it would be like 17 or
Mm,
19. Like, I didn't pull everyone
yeah.
into the fold. Um, Mostly just Julie because she's like the next most advanced GPU person. So I think she had three 2080 Ti's, and I rendered shot 2800, which was the
The
final
beast.
shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, the entire ending of that camera, like moving all the way down the mountain and then pulling all the way back out, that was like an insane number of frames with all the passes. Um, so yeah, I think Julie's computer rendered that one for me, and then everything else was done on my own machines, um, except for two shots that Eddie worked on.
Oh
So it
yeah,
was like
that's true.
out of 25 shots, it's like I was responsible for 23
Yeah.
at the end of the
It's
day.
yeah, you have a breakdown that's cooking up on your website, which will be interesting, and I'll try my darndest to match it on the other side because there were so few responsibilities that were like handled by so few people, or there were many
Hmm.
responsibilities handled by so few people that like we could really showcase a lot of the stuff, and a lot of it overlaps kind of in like the weird workflows that we figured out. One of my favorite things that you kind of mentioned in the Slack was that I don't know many people that would brag about this, and maybe that's why
Yeah.
it's not that commonly known, but we used a lot of Houdini viewport renders of volumes directly in comp
Hmm.
just due to like time and the fact that
Hmm.
Houdini for some reason has really pushed how their volumes look in their viewport, and we could export them at real time. So there's two shots in there that are kind of funny weird things to break down as comps, where it's like, and this one is just rendered out of a viewport, which you would
Yeah.
never do in any other use case, but it worked for what we
Hmm.
needed. But yeah, just funny little interesting things of that nature, which would never fly at big studios that have like real
Hmm.
Houdini pipelines. But we were just kind of flying by the seat of our pants of just like, you know, yeah, I don't know, it's working, and no one's
Hmm.
really gonna like if it gets a shot done. It's technically the right way to do it.
Right.
So lots of funny stuff like that. But yeah, I'm in the same boat. I just got a 3090, and very excited to. I did a bunch of the RTX on, RTX off, because I have a 1080 Ti still to kind
Mm.
of run for my monitors, and then the 3090s just to do all of my Octane stuff, which I've been getting back into. You should. I know you're more Redshift, but I mean 14 GPUs, you could be doing a lot of render RNDR kind of mining with all of that at your box fort place. Have you thought about
I
doing any of that or looked into it?
I could. Yeah. Everyone asked me why I don't mine cryptocurrency at the office because our electricity is not
Mm,
metered. Like AKA we, I don't pay for the electricity. Like
mm-hmm.
it's just a flat amount, like which is kind of vaguely rolled into our rent, like from our
Weird.
landlord. So yeah, a lot of people would call me dumb for not leveraging the last 2.5 years of free electricity across that many graphics cards. I recognize that, but like it's also kind of like it's a little bit excessive. And I also didn't want to like blow up my own spot. Like I'm
Mm,
very happy that I haven't had to pay for rendering or
right.
electricity costs for rendering because like if I want to do my own short
Mm-hmm.
projects or whatever, and I just like let 12 GPUs crank in a room and just crack the window open because it's the winter time here in Detroit, and it's like
Instant
all
cooling.
the
Yeah.
right, all the energy from this GPUs are gonna fly right out the window. Like, okay, sweet, like that's a really good setup, um, and I don't want to like mess that up for
Right.
myself
That
because
makes sense.
I am for sure certain the landlord would recognize, oh, COVID wiped out everybody in this building, but now all of a sudden the electricity usage is still
Right.
thousands of dollars. Like, okay, I think that's a good way to get myself like spotted.
Right.
Um,
Or metered. We actually ran into that not with electricity, but with your Wi-Fi uh, on our project, where
yeah,
we
yeah,
just narrowly escaped hitting I didn't know there was a maximum amount you could use up of transferring on your Wi-Fi, but you hit it, and they
yeah,
and they told you that you couldn't do it anymore,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is crazy.
For anyone who is confused, apparently my Comcast or like my internet service provider, I have a 1.2 terabyte per month usage allotment, and I got to like 1.194 terabytes, and thankfully it was like the month was ending, and the next day was like, okay, like it's a new, like
Hmm.
I've got a new fresh 1.2 terabytes to like work with, and so as the project ended, like the last week or however many days was all on a new data plan, but for like 1 month or for one day, the last day of that month, I was like really scared of like, okay, how slow is like, are they going to throttle my internet too?
Right.
Because like we're working over Dropbox, rendering EXRs with like 20 something passes, which I'm constantly syncing from my home computer to my computer at the office because like I use a program that keeps everything mirrored on my hard drives so that way I can work on something at the office, drive home, open it on my home computer, and like all the drive letters, like all the like texture file pathing is like all identical from one computer to the next, so that's like a really seamless experience. Like I've eliminated all of those headaches of like operating multiple boxes,
Hmm.
except for like there's obviously like the licensing annoyances of like having to buy multiple licenses of this and that, but um, from a UX perspective, I've done as much as I can to smooth out as a one man band operating three, going on four computers for myself. It's as seamless as I've been able to make it. Um, but with that comes a crap load of internet usage. And on our project, syncing all these like EXR sequences, and then you were sending me like Alembic and Houdini
Mm-hmm.
sims. And it was just like, oh, and then like our comper like was getting all of my stuff. He was rendering, saving out like collects, here and
After
there,
Effects,
like
yeah.
right. So it was like some shots would get doubled up, and it's like, okay, this is a 60 gig EXR sequence, and then he collects it, and then like does whatever, and I was like, oh dang, like okay, all of a sudden one shot just took 10% of my entire months of internet.
Yeah, because the
Like
biggest one, I think, to 2800 was like 120 something gigabytes as it
yeah, when
collected.
right
Yeah.
as yeah, which is
Which was a
insane.
first for me, a first time I'd ever seen any scene, let alone like normally I was like, projects could get up to that, but like scene, just a single scene and one of these uh animation, like it was something I had never seen before, and luckily that was not on my plate to figure out, but you you figured it out, and we eventually it was kind of a weird hat that like you had to wear as well, was like just figuring out pipeline as well as
Mhm.
like making the things that were going in the pipeline kind of on the fly of like, well, this is not working anymore, and we've like hit a massive bottleneck that will not let the project move forward, so we have to figure out something else, and then you'd get buried in like 4 hours of figuring that out, and then have to pop up and then go back and do all the work that was supposed to be happening in those 4 hours. And
Mhm.
there was a funny juggling game that we had to play. We have a question from the audience, from the chat, that says, what is the maximum number of tabs you would consider acceptable to have open in your web browser?
Well, I know who's asking that, and I'm gonna say that it's under 100, which is uh, a do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. Because if I could screenshot on uh, Skype right now, I live my life entirely at the point where tabs are only a thumbnail. It's only the
Yeah,
favicon.
when they go away, that's when I know that it's too many, and I have to like start like looking through them, because then I can't
Mhm.
tell what's happening. But that's my maximum. I don't know what the number of that is, but like as soon as you can't see the preview and they're just gray, that's too many. You've hit
Mhm.
the limit. But then I'll do the bad thing of just, I'll get there and I'll just do the save all tabs into a bookmark, and I'll just be like, look at this later, and then I'll just close all of them and start a new one and never look at those ones ever again. It's like I'll just have like 1,000 ArtStation pages open and just be like, I'll look at this as inspiration and save these later, and then I just never
Mhm.
do. But um
Yeah,
yeah, who
I'm at the point where like my main Chrome window is like completely bombed out from right to left. It's only favicons. There's no text, and then I have four other Chrome windows which have their own sets of tabs. So like one of these is like um, uh, I was taking the School of Motion
Hmm,
class, lights, camera, render.
right.
Awesome, really
Everyone
awesome
seems to be
class.
taking that one, and everyone seems to be posting really cool stuff, so
Yeah. So I have
very.
like one window is like the course lesson for that, and then like a handful of other random Octane
Mm,
tutorials and like Raphael Rao's like
mm,
OSL repository, Google Drive, and like the Otoy like forum post for like downloading, like Octane, like the plugin or whatever. And then like what's another window? My third window is like my current job, so it's like our daily Google Meet call,
mm,
Milanote, which is like our project management thing, a couple Google Drive tabs, like a PDF, like a deck,
mm.
like another client review notes, um, and then a couple random Google searches that are like related to this job specifically. And it was like I had to figure out some like weird dynamics issue that like I was complaining about on Twitter, and then like for me it's like it's spiraled out of control. Um, uh, it's no longer just one Chrome window of tabs; it's multiple Chrome windows of tabs.
It's different thought
Um,
processes. I mean, it makes sense. It's still organized.
kind of. I mean, this first one, I'm not going to lie, is a little excessive. I definitely have tabs in here that I know are more than a year old, because a good chunk of them refer to nuclear energy,
Hmm.
and that ties into like a on the back burner, like personal project, short film, whatever thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time I touched that project was January 2020. So I know that those tabs are more than a year old now.
Oh,
um,
yeah, I have that as well. Just so many personal projects where it's like, I don't know, it's a just sort of become a thing in the industry where it's like, well, obviously you do your day job and you have those projects,
Hmm.
but like you must have your big, magnum opus short that you are also working on at the same time. But then also don't forget that if you're not posting for that thing, you must also post the shorter little things to tell people that you're still learning things. And then on
Right.
top of that, now you must sell those for money on the
Yeah.
blockchain. It's like, how
Yeah.
many? Can I just make the art and get paid for the art and do the things?
I
Because
think
that
that's
part
called
was
being.
hard enough. Yeah.
I think that's called being staff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's reverted back to like that's just the easier thing. No, it's not. It's hard being staff as well because you're then stuck with freelancers like us when we dip out after it's ended, and then they come back and they're like, "Can you guys make changes to this?" And then you're just like digging through mountains of other people's files. You're just like, I don't know where I am, and it's dark, and I'm scared, and all these
Hmm.
plugins are unlinked, and none of these files are where people say they are. But yeah, that's the downside to staff as well. But it is both have good things. I get that question a lot. In the what we'll move into is the Instagram questions. People are always like, staff or freelance, and I've done both. Admittedly, not as long as like someone that should be giving advice, but yeah, there's upsides and downsides to both. Currently, I'm in favor of freelance just because I get bored with a certain genre of things too quickly to be staff at a place that like admittedly has to do sort of the same thing all the time
Hmm.
because that's what they make money doing. So I was at an ad agency for a long time, and then I was like, I don't want to keep making social posts for Duncan. Like I want to do other things, and I keep getting offers to do other things, so I'll go do that. But nothing against the companies, and it's definitely good to be staff at places if you like doing what those people are doing, or you want a steady paycheck. And freelance is a whole nother world of like, you know, good things, but also like, yeah, there's definitely that weekend scaries that I get, and that you kind of mentioned before. You've joined a project. It's the weekend before the Monday you start normally, and just like, do
Hmm.
I even know 3D? Like, do I know how to
Yeah.
do this thing still? Like, have I just accidentally been faking it the entire time, and this is where it will be called out and shown to everyone that I really don't know what I'm doing? Hopefully that goes away at some point in your career, but I don't know if it ever will, because a lot of times you're just like, they're gonna find out. They're gonna find out that I don't know how to do this, and that I've just been.
It hasn't.
It's all just grayscale gorilla in my brain, and that's that's all I know.
Yeah, I mean that hasn't gone away from me. Um, I was brought onto my current project, and they're like, "All right, awesome! Like you're gonna handle like a bunch of like these complicated things because it's like more of like uh, it's a studio that would be typically more well known for like the illustrative motion graphicsy flavor of our industry as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to like 3D. Like, oh, like what's Billy doing on a job with like a more illustrative based studio? But it's
Mm-hmm.
like, even places like that will pick up 3D work, but then because it's something that if they're not as familiar with, it's like, oh, like what are the pitfalls of like, okay, we need to make a ball roll. Like you can use dynamics or like you
Mm-hmm.
can use like some espresso or whatever to like calculate the
Right.
circumference, and then you
Mm-hmm.
times that by some other shit that I Google, and then like you figure it out, and it's like, okay, cool. Like I've got a rolling ball, and it doesn't break now. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, cool. I can animate it, or like I can pass it off to somebody else who's better at animating, and the ball will roll better than I could have ever made it roll.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I just made it not like slide,
Yeah.
like over rotate or under rotate. So it's like, oh, okay, like I can do a lot of little things like that throughout the day. Like that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But um or like on the next project, it's like, like what you and I worked on, it's like crazy massive like pipeline stuff, like a bunch of like comp work as well. Like I spent almost as much time in After Effects by the end of the project than I spent in cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I guess every project is different. Yeah, like you were saying, being staff at an agency or a studio that's going to eventually become known for X, you are going to do a lot of X,
Mm-hmm.
whether you like it or not. So like, yeah, to echo what you were saying in the freelance versus staff argument, uh, sure you can make you can either make more or you can have more time off if
Mm-hmm.
you are freelance versus like your 15 or 20 days of like PTO as
Mm-hmm.
a staff artist. But you are your own producer, you are your own invoicing
Yep.
department, like all of you know you're doing a whole lot more, and that is where you earn either that more money or that more time off.
Hmm.
Like I make probably the same amount of money now as a freelancer as probably what I would command as a salaried artist. But last year I had 5 months off of like
Mm.
not working on client work. So yeah, like I filled in a number of those months with personal stuff or 2 months of Animal Crossing on the Switch. And
Yeah.
like I wasn't upset about not being paid for that month because I had, you know, however many tens of thousands of dollars like came in like from right from the the big rush at the end of the year, which is inevitable,
Hmm.
as production budgets or yearly marketing budgets come through, and there's like this huge influx of work, like October, November, December, and then like you work a bunch. Some payments are like net 30 or whatever, so they come in and like it's like February half the time by the time you get
Yeah.
paid for that
30 is
work.
nice. 40 is normal. 60
Hmm.
is brutal. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's stuff that you don't normally think about.
Right. So it's like I'm being paid for the last project most of the time when I'm working on the
Hmm.
current project. So it's like if I don't then have a next project, it's like, well, I'm still going to get money from this other thing I just did.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like very, I don't know, to touch back on like the some months on, some months off, like larger sort of wave of like how much time do I spend on the computer kind of thing. Um, I feel like that the freelance model suits me pretty well. And the bonus of like box fort or like having a collective of other artists around you is like you, Isaac, you represent one email inbox, like in terms of like getting
Hmm.
job opportunities or people who hit you up
Yeah.
for work. But I am in a room where it's 8 email inboxes,
Hmm.
and like if somebody hits me up for 3D and I'm booked, then I'm like, oh, this could be a fit for like, Julie or Justin,
Hmm.
like, depending on the style or whatever, because like we all
Yeah.
know like what each of our strengths or weaknesses are. Or like, hey, so and so needs storyboards. Like, oh, okay, well, like Dave's free and he can draw, so like
Hmm.
hit him up.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is like the kind of best of both worlds. Like what we've managed to build for ourselves is like, yeah, we're in the same room, we're doing individual projects, but like you still have like that coworker vibe of like
Hmm.
being in the studio, and like you go up to get a drink of water, and then like you RAM preview something, you get up, you go walk to whatever, you see something some cool on someone else's monitor, you're like, oh dude, like what's that? Or like, oh, like what if you made it do this or
Hmm.
whatever. And then you have that like cool, like in-person exchange of ideas, which is like, yeah, you can kind of replicate it online over Slack or like screen share, but it's like it's just a little less organic
Hmm.
because the technology like barriers, you know, pose like a little bit of a fight.
Right.
So
You can gauge a
uh,
lot better if you're going to bother someone in studio. Like, are they in the
mhm.
zone? Are they just kind of like chilling by their spot where it's like there's no way of knowing with they just like look like they're online and you just like send them
Mhm.
something or you start up a conversation. It's like people will probably be polite and continue it, but it's like you can't really like even with like social cues like gauge if someone's like willing to have that conversation, which is something that I
Right.
really liked about going as a freelancer into a studio, along with kind of the whole new pool of other freelancers that you kind of got to network with and sit around and definitely bounce ideas off and learn from and have like hear stories over lunch over all their experiences and grow a network naturally that way. Kind of all like immediately stopped as soon as COVID hit. So it's cool that you
Mhm.
guys have, you are in a studio, but you're still able to kind of have that like network of people to work with. Um, we can move into, we got a few Instagram questions, and some of them were interesting enough and weren't just technical questions that they were worth the time. So someone asked if you're gonna get into Unreal and 4, which is the current one, 4.2.6, I think is the current one, or if you're gonna wait until 5 comes out, possibly this year, to kind of get into it. And kind of a general question: do you think that MoGraph people should be looking into real time as like a thing to start kind of putting on their radar as something that they should learn?
Apologies if you hear a cat scratching a scratching post
I
behind me,
don't.
but
I don't. So I think we're good.
um, so Unreal, yeah, for me it's like scary in the sense of like this is a whole new software paradigm that
Hmm.
like if you're gonna go from Cinema 4D to like Houdini or like, Cinema 4D to Blender or whatever. It's like it's still the same program
Hmm.
in the sense of like this is what it does and this is like generally in very broad brush strokes, it's doing the same thing with the same intention and the
Hmm.
same set of tools. Whereas like entering into Unreal, it's like it's a game engine. You
Yeah.
don't model in it, uh, as far as I'm aware of. It's
You
like
can
very
a little
rudimentary
bit,
at
yeah.
best. But it's like you're going to be importing stuff, and when you import those things, you also have to be considerate of like performance, like
Hmm.
polygon counts and stuff. And it's like I do what I can to not think about that stuff
Hmm.
by buying more GPUs.
Yeah.
Personally, like I don't care about render time because I just buy more graphics cards or I buy more expensive graphics cards. And that is like I use the high poly LOD or like not even the LOD like in Quixel Bridge. I'm like,
The straight scan that's like
give me
bajillions.
the
Yeah.
give me the 90 million polygon cliff face. I don't care because Redshift's like, all right, I got you, fam. Like,
Instance me.
cool,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, go to town. Um, to me, what's scary about Unreal is like that's the opposite of how I work.
Hmm.
And so like, oh, like prepping, like or like baking normal maps, all of a sudden is like now like a thing. I'm like, I like know that's a word
Yep.
and I could Google how to do that if I needed to, but
Hmm.
like that I don't know how to do that. Do
Yeah.
I have an interest in doing that? Not right now. But the flip side of that is there are some like really cool fan like re-inspired artworks of like honestly World of Warcraft like game like zones
Hmm.
like I'm like, oh dude, that's a really cool reinterpretation of like Shadowmoor Valley or something, or like some whatever terrain, and I'm like, dang, I should learn Unreal.
Yeah.
And then
It
I
makes its
feel
way
like,
through our community every once in a while
hmm
where something will be like a touchdown piece where I think the last one that I really remember was someone made this insane rainy storm scene that was like
oh
tons of
yeah,
tree dynamics and stuff blowing through the scene, and everyone's like, maybe we should be learning Unreal because my god, that would take a long time to do like traditionally with like all the
hmm
sims involved. But it's that weird thing where it's time spent in different areas where it's like the
right,
sim might have been really fast, but like yeah, bringing all those level of details of like the plants and the garbage and all that stuff from like how you would traditionally do it into the new one is like, oh, time spent there versus the other place, which is I think
hmm
um for what they've advertised, 5 is like the thing that I think will bring a lot of MoGraph people over, where they've promised us we don't have to do that. They've promised us
hmm
bring your ZBrush sculpt directly in, and we'll be able to instance it 1,000 times or 100,000 times at whatever millions of polygons it is, and you don't have to bake things anymore, do level of detail, because it's all whatever dark magic we've written into this code for
yeah,
5 that's gonna make it all easy. Which I think if it is that, then that would kind of that's the big barrier. Is like, yeah, like you have to work in a completely backwards workflow that makes
hmm
it run real time, but also makes you have to build it to run real time, which I think is a hard thing to explain to people. Where it's like, why is your render take like 2 hours? It's like, well, we're shooting rays into the glass and it's going all around the glass and it's
it's a
coming
bunch of
out the
math,
glass.
man.
Yeah, it's a ton of math. Whereas the other one is like you're just kind of like, you push over like the cardboard facade and everything falls back and you're like, oh, that's not
hmm
a real reflection. That's a rewrapped reflection on top of that thing based on a bunch of spheres in the room, or that's not real
hmm
GI. But I think that yeah, Quixel has kind of been my place where I've like they've done a good job of catering to both in the products that they release, but also in the content they release for Unreal, of kind of saying like, hey, you know, here's an extremely, because that's kind of the issue, is like there's not a lot of like good art direction I find in a lot of the Unreal content, but they're able to kind of be like, hey, here's this amazing scene we built, here's how to build it with our tools that are
hmm
vetted to be really good, and it looks like things that would be offline renders. And I think that's kind of the place where a lot of people will be converted over. Lots of cool MoGraph people like Jonathan Winbush. I've been
hmm
following a lot more. He has the great merging of Cinema 4D traditional MoGraph into a lot more Unreal now. But yeah, I was curious to see if you were in the 2021s planning to bring it over, if you didn't have to do all the backwards goofy things.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's on my radar right
Mm-hmm.
now. I'm like more focused on finishing the two projects. Like the one I'm currently on, and then the next one that I have currently booked,
Mm-hmm.
which will be a few weeks, and then hopefully getting back into like my stupid short film thing that I alluded to. It's like, okay, I worked on it a bit in 2017,
Mm-hmm.
didn't touch it in 2018, worked on it a lot in 2019, didn't touch it, worked on it for a month in 2020, haven't touched it. So I'm like, okay, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay,
5 years. Yeah.
I don't know how to count, but like that's a long time, too much time to spend on one project. So let's get it out the door.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my next and only goal. Usually I have like goals that will span over like a few years or whatever. Um, like it was like, oh, like make something cool enough that allows me to present at like the Maxon booth. It's like, okay, that's a vague goal, but like I have a sense of like what direction to actually go in. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
like climb a mountain or whatever, some like
Yeah.
crazy like untouchable goal. So it's like usually I'd have something like that on my radar. Right now, the only equivalent of that is like just try to finish this short film thing. Um, which like I don't know if I might just shelve it again. Who knows?
That's always the nice thing is that you can. I always get like way too in my head on those sorts of things, and it's like, man, like the longer I don't release this, the more I've built it up in my head that like it has to
Mhm,
be even greater than the time spent planning it originally, and then I add more work
mhm.
to myself. But I'm also like, I don't know, doesn't matter if it doesn't, so I'll just shelve it and like go on. Like I also lose interest in things like almost immediately as soon as I start them. Like I love planning and thinking about what things will be, and then like the moment I'm like have to go like lay out the scene, I'm like, oh, I'll just shelf you, and then I'll get back to you in like 5 months, and then
Yeah.
pick it back up if I have like an interest. So that's kind of the nice thing of like having orbiting like projects where it's like, oh yeah, I'm into sculpting now. I'll get into that where I kind of left off the project because I didn't want to be sculpting at that moment. But
Hmm.
it's a nice thing to be able to shelf it. But it definitely does kind of eat at the back of your brain. So especially I think I've
Yeah.
had one that's been like, yeah, 26. I thought of it at the end of college, so it would have been, yeah, 2017, so almost the same amount of time.
Hmm.
And it's just been sitting there. I'm like, eventually. Also, sometimes I don't have the technical skills, and so I just like shelf it until like I can like have unlocked
Yep.
those parts of my journey and can come back to it and actually like
Yeah.
go down that path, which is a funny way of
Yeah.
thinking about it.
It's like I got that point in the skill
Yep.
tree. I can come
Mm-hmm.
back and revisit that side quest now
Mm-hmm.
because I can unlock that door. But
Oh my
yeah,
god.
completely unsolicited pro tip, just from my own experience or for anyone listening, is like the like getting engaged and getting the ball rolling on personal project stuff is like, okay, it's really great to spend a day like on like pre-pro stuff or like in your head, like write out the idea, try to do like, even if it sounds cheesy and it doesn't sound applicable, trust me, it is. Like set up like some ideas or like a little bit of like world building or some sort of like guideline that you can like stick to when you get scared eventually later on in the project. And then the next day, what's really important for me is like getting one session in, like, 4 hours or 6 hours or whatever you can manage, um, and getting it to a point to where you could like, if I posted that to Instagram, I like wouldn't hate it.
Mm.
Like get like one shot, if it's a whole short film or whatever, like just get one shot where it's like, okay, like I'm kind of working with something. And then at least for me, that's how I've always tricked my brain into like, okay, I've put enough into this that like, all right, I can go do all that unfun, like, blocking out all of these other damn scene files and like
Mm-hmm.
putting together a Premiere timeline of like a boardomatic or whatever. But
Yeah.
like it's like that little like brain hack of like getting like a little taste of like dessert,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go back and you eat all your veggies, and you set like a good groundwork for doing like like a big ambitious personal project. But like getting that first little hit of like, all right, like I can start the IPR and like see something and I'm like, dang, okay, like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, we're like kind of working on something. At
Yeah.
least for me, that's always like, that's been the thing that keeps me working on the thing long enough to then at least I can morally guilt myself into continuing,
Yep.
as opposed to like it just falling flat right out the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know. it's like I, everyone's like approach to that is like so different, and
Hmm.
I don't know, like if you have a different approach, or if you've even settled on something, maybe each time you approach stuff it's like a different thing and you haven't, nailed one
Yeah.
thing down or another.
Yeah,
um,
I would say that something I've been trying to do more is definitely a lot more of the like story to something, because it's kind of I went through a lot of the area where it was like my main goal was like technical achievement will be the thing that makes this cool, and then after doing that a couple of times and like being able to hit a certain mark, you're like, oh, it doesn't matter, like no one cares like if it's a really photorealistic or like a cool scene, like that doesn't really engage people very much, and so that's not really something to chase. And so I've kind of been working back and like, instead of watching the tutorial that tells me how to make like volumes look way cooler in Octane, it's like I sign up for masterclass to like have Aaron Sorkin like tell me how to write cool stories, and it's like write stories that people will care about, and then knowing that I have a good amount of skills to put visuals towards it is kind of my thing. So I always have tried now in my ideas that I had of like, this is a cool visual of like, how can I now extrapolate an interesting story and make this more than just like a cool visual gag, and put it into like actual an arc of something. And so that's kind of been like my reworking of a lot of stuff. But I think that, yeah, that's normally my process is all a lot of things are birthed out of just a cool image that I get out of an like amalgamation of different inspo, and then I'll just like put it up as a render, because I just like, you learn certain things and then you apply them into an image and then you post it to social and it kind of just like dies there. But like after a while, maybe some of those feel like they could be something, and then I kind of try to build something out of it. And I'm currently working through a totally different workflow where I'm kind of riffing off something that exists in one of the longest forms of a short that I've been trying to get rolling for the past year or so, is a Star Wars um, short film based off the Rebels TV show that kind of shows, and it's very stylized, very cool representation of the Star Wars universe. But they have the last fight between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, and I was like, I love that. I love Star Wars. It can keep me engaged enough because I just love the world and all the inspiration that I can pull from it and all that sorts of things. But it's in such a stylized medium that I was like, oh, I could inject my look that's like a lot more tries to go towards like photorealism and that sort of stuff, and tackle characters, which I had never done. So that's kind of my current, you know, big piece that I'm going on. And I'm kind of working backwards because I kind of already have the storyboard laid out because I have like the exact shots to match to, and like can pull reference from all their stuff that they've been doing. And it's kind of, yeah, my big point right now is like characters, and it's like I've kind of halted on that. So it's like this weird, I go through a bunch of different rabbit holes of like spiraling off into like learning about like how do I just make a character, or like skin rendering or different things, or like hair grooming. It's like all these cool paths that kind of present themselves at the beginning of the project, where it's like I want to know if I can even do these to kind of, like you were saying, get that first cool frame out. And like
hmm
even before, normally that was the easy part, but now I'm just like, oh, I have to learn a lot of things and like actually learn things before I can even get this first cool frame out to see if I can start
hmm
working on it. So kind of as I'm learning that, to keep me motivated, I've actually been reverting back to doing a lot of like the production managing of like, okay, lay out the spreadsheet, know who's in each shot, know how long each shot is, know what assets I need to have to build this shot, go to Megascans and to quickly block out stuff, like pull all the assets I think I will need as props and then populate a scene roughly with those, and different stuff like that, just to keep me like moving as I have to then go and use the other part of like my free time to like learn how to sculpt the character, or like learn what goes into like photorealistic like texturing of a character, and like blood flow
hmm
maps, and like all these crazy things that never really touched my plate before because I never really advertised myself as like a character person. So that's kind of been a whole new learning experience. But it's definitely been, I think I started the idea of this like right as quarantine started, so like March, and then it goes up and down. I go in like
hmm
crazy waves of like major inspiration to do things, and then lulls of like a month long where I like don't really want to touch my computer after work, and so it goes
oh yeah.
through. I don't make much progress, but currently in a high point. So it's like a lot of work has been done. Also trying to document it. We were talking a little bit before the stream started of like trying to document your process as you go through a personal project is like kind of hard, because it's like you want to move fast and you want to get through things, and it's hard to like take a pause and like capture like what's happening in like day 1 and day 10,
Mm-hmm.
like all these progress moments, because it's really cool to look back on, but you kind of, if you don't do it while it's happening, it's impossible to capture afterwards. And so
Right.
that's also been part of the process this time, is to go slow, think about what I'm doing, capture what I'm doing, but also keep it moving, in a sense, is like another part. But yeah, that's enough about my projects. um, Speaking of projects, what's kind of your Everest project? This is something I ask a lot of people. Your Everest, your dream project. What would be like? You can die happy knowing you worked on X, Y, and Z.
That's a good question. I don't think I have. I don't have anything that jumps immediately to the top of my head,
Mm-hmm.
because I like to not think I have an idea of where life will take me.
Right.
Maybe that's like a weird perspective, but it's just like in like my personal life, family life, whatever, I've like been thrown so many curveballs
Mm-hmm.
unexpectedly that I've like learned better than to think I have an idea of what's to lie ahead. And like even right now, like I'm literally going through that like in two aspects with like in my personal life. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like there's no such thing as stability. That's my like uh big like picture thing. So like I mean past examples of like, well, I never thought I'd make a car in a computer that would turn into a real car. It's
Yeah.
like, all right, like looking back on that, I would describe like in the moment, like, dang, this is a dream project. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I 10 years, wind the clock back, I would have never expected that. Um, so I guess, yeah, like I mean, probably working on a film, like either feature film or like something that would be considered like a big name, IP or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's probably the realistic answer. Um, but like, is do I wake up every morning and I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna make uh, a Superman fan film or like you name it, whatever. It's like
Mm-hmm.
no, that's not for me right now. It's just like um, trying to finish this like short film thing that I've been poking at, which is like has I don't know. I guess you would. Some people are going to consider like nuclear energy a political topic, or like a politicized
Mm. Oh, I
topic.
think I remember seeing stills of this like 2 years ago, where it was like an
Yeah.
abandoned room, and like outside there were tons of like huge, and it was like my first introduction of like, look what redshift like instancing can do, where you were
Hmm.
like, look at that entire town outside the window. It's not a photo,
Yep.
it's all there. And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that's
So
nuts.
yeah, for me, like getting that out the door is going to be like right now. That's my dream, um, because to me, it's like a message or like a talking point or something that like for me, it's predating my interest in MoGraph.
Hmm.
Um, so that's like that's cool. Like my interest in cars kind of predates MoGraph as well. So that's why like when I worked on the Kazi, like
Mm-hmm.
at the time it's like okay that sounds like a dream project, and so that's like my current thing. So yeah, no, I guess I wouldn't say I have like a classical answer. I've worked on at this point I've worked on a title sequence, well, two in 2019. I worked on the half res titles, and then the Blend Fest titles a little bit. I helped out with Gunner because obviously we're all in the same building. Um, so like I've done an event conferences. I've done like big name tech stuff. I've done like well now I've done like a video game cinematic ish thing. Yeah, like do I want to work on a bigger title sequence like an elastic level, HBO title
Mm-hmm.
sequence? Yeah, sure, of course. Like it would be rad to work on something like that. But like like I've been in this long enough that I've like scratched enough of these like kind of loose, vague ideas of like what a goal project would be.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm just open to whatever is going to come next. Um, you know, I would hope that the trajectory will continue its way up in terms of like whether it's prestige or um, my involvement or like my contribution to projects. I don't want to be like a worker bee
Mm-hmm.
in the pipeline for forever
Yep.
maybe. So maybe that's the route I take. that turns into a dream. I don't really know, and I accept that.
Hmm.
Um,
I think it's also ever changing. Like a
yeah.
lot of things that you think, yeah, kind of like you're saying, you think this is the dream, and then you get there, and not in a bad way. It just ends up to be like, oh, that wasn't really as like crazy as I thought it was gonna be, or the I have roles that I definitely like. It's like you're always told that you should have like the role that you aspire to have, and like that helps guide your career path. But then like yeah, like techno like director, that sounds amazing. I love being technical, and then you like see what that is, and you're like, maybe I really don't want to go down that path because it looks like I have to go this way to go there. Or it's like I would
Hmm.
love to be a creative director, and it's like, but then you don't really get to like be on the machine that much, and I kind of like that. So it's like maybe I don't really want to go that route. It's like a director, but it's like, then you end up managing people. It's like I don't really want to. It's just like I don't really know if there's like a thing. It's just like I don't know, just like to create ideas that you have is like still always like the main goal. And currently, like the model that is freelancing is like you kind of are always creating other people's goals and applying your knowledge or your little spin to it, which is like it's the dream just to be like in full control, which is kind of what personal projects are for and are a good outlet for that. But yeah, I
Right.
definitely feel you there. It's like dream project, dream thing. It's like the easy answer is like work on an IP I like, or work on the most recognizable form of this medium, which is
Hmm.
typically like a motion title, for some big things that you can see your name in the credits. I mean, that's always an easy one. I always would love to be able to like point it out, and just be like, hey, that's mine in the studio that worked on this. But it's also like been so close to doing that, or when in studios that are doing that, it's like it's not as hyped up as it's made out to be. It's a lot of stress working on those sorts
Yeah.
of things. um, so yeah, definitely not a bad answer, definitely an answer that I resonate with. Another one that kind of also asked everyone is what inspires you. I mean, it's a very general question, but like kind of where do you
Hmm.
get a lot of inspiration? Do you find it like online? Do you find it off the computer in nature and sorts of things? Lots of people have lots of different answers, so kind of curious where your inspiration comes from for the pieces that you make.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's annoying to say I also don't have a clear cut, like
How dare you?
immediate, right off the top of my head answer of like what's inspiring. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, obviously, I spend an obscene amount of time on the computer, so I'm like always seeing as much as I can on Slack, on
Hmm.
Twitter, ArtStation, whatever. So I'm always adding stuff to Pinterest boards, and like it's fun to rifle through those when it's I've got a gap between bookings,
Hmm.
and I'm like, I want to spin up a new little personal thing
Right.
for 2 weeks, and set like a little goal of like, all right, like I'm gonna grab this thing, this still, and like I like the way that this thing is moving from this GIF and this
Hmm.
Pinterest board. So like let's find like a way to like mash those two things together that is like um, within my skill set currently, or like am I going to decide to branch out my skill set or
Hmm.
whatever. So I guess my inspiration is like um, the work itself,
Right.
like getting something finished, throwing it up online, and then getting the attention, or like realizing that I'm on somebody new, somebody that I look up to, or like I appreciate their artwork, recognizing that they now know that I'm a thing and
Mm.
I'm in my little bubble making my
Yeah.
little art. I guess that's probably what has kept me going the most over, I'd say, the last like 2 years, is like that realization of like, all right, I'm doing my thing. Um, I seem to be stable enough, like financially, friendship wise, uh, career path wise, whatever. So I'm not like, I don't have like the shaky leg, like baby deer, like,
Yep.
you're trying to find your footing thing anymore. Like, okay, like, I don't know, maybe you might say I'm trotting, maybe, or maybe we're approaching a gallop. It's not a full sprint yet. I'm not going to say I'm at that point in my career, but um, yeah, it's like, okay, well, where do I go from here? Okay, well, it's like you just, you try to run a little bit faster each time, and uh, with this internet connected, uh, you know, community of artists, it's like, all right, like, okay, cool. Aaron's work's great. Uh, Met him at an event, kind of became little Slack buddies, or like, like Twitter or whatever, friends with X artist.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, cool. Like I can call that person like a little friend or
Hmm.
whatever. And it's like, all right, that's sweet. I don't know. That's fun. I really like that. I
Hmm.
really like meeting people and like forming, a bond or like a collective, like uh, shared experience or whatever. Like either on a project or like um, being like accountability friends with like like, oh, I'm working on a personal thing and you're working on a personal thing, and like we're gonna DM each other like feedback
Hmm.
stuff a bunch, over the course of like a month or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's cool. That blossoms into like a little friendship.
Yep.
And then, some of those friendships like, establish and like, you hold on to them for a long time. Other ones fade away, a little bit here and there, which
Hmm.
is fine. It's a natural part of life. Um, but I think, yeah, that's probably, as an artist, that's, I don't see that changing,
Mm.
like that, like spirit.
Right.
So that's probably what inspires me. It would be cool to form up Box Fort into being a thing. Like a moment ago, you said, um, working on client work, it's like you're not always in control. Working on personal stuff, you are in control. So I guess the inspiration or the goal or whatever would be like to always be in control all of the time. You know, that
Ultimate
sounds
power.
lofty.
Yeah.
That sounds like lofty. Like because if you're working for a client, you're gonna have to listen to them
Hmm.
at some point. Um, but somehow, some people wind up getting to a point to where they don't have to do that
Yep.
anymore.
They are like
Um,
sought out by brand and just like do the thing that you do,
right?
and then just slap us on the back of it, and it's like, wow, that is yeah, it is literally the kind of Renaissance dream of like a patron just to your art, and you are
Hmm.
sought after just to not be like molded into execute the thing, but to execute your thing towards their um, brand or vision or whatever they
Right.
need.
Putting your spin on their property.
Right. Yeah, I think that it's really cool when you can kind of start to see people bridge that gap or kind of revert back into what is typically kind of sought after as like sort of more like fine artists or like more the masters sort of thing. It is
Hmm.
cool to see some of those studios able to rise like around that sort of thing. Like one that comes to mind is like 6 and 5 is like 6 and 5 to 6 and 5. It doesn't matter if you're Windows, and it doesn't matter if you're this like speaker brand. It's gonna look like 6 and 5, and like they must love doing that. I mean, I'm sure like there's it's not like peachy keen the whole way through, but like they've definitely established a thing that people like seek out and has
Hmm.
like really put them on the map as a place where yeah, your Windows doesn't make them make something that looks like what Tendril makes for Windows. It's like definitely still their look for all those backdrops and stuff that they worked on. So yeah, that's definitely. I think that that's the first time anyone said that other people. It's less of like oh, I go outside, or I really like looking at this specific place. It's like the connections and other artists really inspire you to keep being like an artist and keep working in the space, which I definitely resonate with that. It's definitely a cool thing. It's really cool coming from everyone starts as just someone doing it on their own, and then they get introduced into like a community, and they see these names at the top that float around that are like well known in the community but unknown to anyone else outside of it that they would
Hmm.
talk to, and you're just like, wow, those are the crazy people. Like I just remember mine is like Cornelius. Like when I saw his stuff, I was like, that is the epitome of photorealism and like masterful big pieces. And
Hmm.
then you're just like, that is so cool. Or like you get a glimpse of like they're very accessible because it's a small community online and through the internet. And then like you chat a couple times, you're like, wow, that was really cool. Like that's like a hero of like a small hero of mine. And then fast forward 5-7 years, and you're like very close with these people through the internet and talking to them like fairly regularly, and getting closer to like being on like a friendship level. And it's like, wow, that's just crazy that things like that can form just due to like a like a very, on the most part, a very good community that is like the MoGraph 3D art space. At least the part that I know that we're in connection with on the MoGraph Slack and different areas of Twitter, different areas of Instagram. It's a very welcoming and nice community. Has its up and downs, but it's cool that you can kind of go from just creating art, get introduced, and then eventually kind of form these relationships like you were talking about, and then it can inspire other people to keep making artwork and make better artwork and grow in the space. And I think that that's a very very relatable and very cool thing. Well, I think that can be close. I mean, you've kind of hinted at it, but is there anything that you would projects you're working on currently that people should look out for from you? I mean, your personal project, your work, any of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, keep your eyes posted on whatever Instagram, Twitter, maybe coming to an NFT site
Hmm.
near you. Who knows? I mean,
Interesting.
that's not
Everyone, I
like
think that's everyone's status currently is possibly
right,
coming to crypto art space near you.
right. It's like, yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you and say like, oh yeah, dude, I'm gonna learn Unreal this year. It's like,
Hmm.
no, I'm more than likely gonna have to sell something this year, like just because like it's like a big hot thing or whatever, and
Right.
like I know like the environmental concern is like it's a whole nother
Hmm.
wholly valid can of
Yeah.
worms to get into, which I mean we've already been going 2.5 hours.
Right.
I
I
won't
like to
crack that.
bask in the absolute hypocrisy that a lot of my Twitter is, due to the fact that I was also one person that loves to be anti something,
Hmm.
to a detriment, and then also loves to be super on board with something in the next day and just like be very much convinced into hopping on a bandwagon, um,
Hmm.
and doing all that sorts of stuff. So it's an interesting space. That'd be cool. I think it's I'm not as upset about the space because artist friends of mine are getting paid a fun chunk of change for things that they should get paid
Hmm.
for. So it can't be that bad, but um, yeah, it's an interesting space. So look
Yeah,
for you dropping every single render you've ever made over the past 10 years on Nifty
I'm gonna mint.
Gateway and
I'm
making
gonna mint. I'm gonna mint.
bajillions.
Yeah, I'm gonna mint 4,000 things tonight,
This
and just
stream is minted on Nifty Gateway. This
yeah,
entire stream.
right. I'm just gonna blow through an entire small nation's worth of electricity,
Yeah,
confirming all of these on the blockchain. No, no,
right.
not to very seriously not make a joke of that. That is like a really useful thing that like people ought to keep in mind. If
I think the
my
only
opinion,
good deterrent is like to what you're saying is like it's a big issue, but it costs a lot to do this. I
Mhm.
didn't know that. Like to mint a piece is a really bad for almost all of the electricity that's being sucked to do it. But B, it's not free. Like you can't just mint everything you've ever made because you would
Mhm.
have to have like thousands of dollars to do that, which I didn't know. I thought you could just
Right,
throw it all up, but I guess that's the only upside to high gas fees is that it will deter people from just like running amok on these sites and just putting
right.
everything they've ever made. But yeah, continue.
Um, well, yeah, uh, right. The environmental aspect, because like the little short project or short film, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's a 2 to 3 minute CGI thing. Like I don't know, are these short films? You tell me who's to judge. But I like the word short film, so I'm just
Mm.
gonna keep calling it that. Yeah, hopefully getting that out the door sometime this year. I know better than to set an actual release date on that.
Yep.
So I'm not going to lie about that. Um, that being related to nuclear energy and our future as like a humanity, like where do we get our power kind of thing. Like I actually want to use my ability as a visual artist to convey some very specific opinions that I have, like, and have researched extensively to kind of communicate, like, hey, this is like a thing that like many people don't take seriously anymore, and like part of that is like government stuff here, at least in America.
Mm.
Other parts are like okay, very valid concerns of like historical mishaps that have taken place and have had tragic consequences, but like if we're looking at the trajectory we're on right now, it's not looking too hot.
Mm.
And maybe it's too late. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, dang it. But um,
I mean, as
if I could
evident by
use,
Texas, right? And all of that
right,
stuff of like, I think someone somewhere, I'm going to butcher this, but just our electrical grid, if like things that happen in Texas happen in just like 6 other places, is gone. And like
hmm
America will just be ruined because these were built in the 50s and not
hmm
meant to be as like heavily used as they are now. And if it all goes like Texas, then there is no hope for currently what is barely sustaining our our power draw and where we get stuff from. And yeah,
yeah,
it's a scary realization where you can kind of forget about it while you're using it. And especially digital artists, we rely on it for internet goes
right,
down, Wi-Fi goes down, Electricity goes down, you don't get paid that day, and you physically cannot work unless you can up and move your entire workstation somewhere. And it's a scary thought to think that like we just take it for granted that the
Hmm.
things in the walls work always. um,
Right.
and Texas has shown us like you know if people in power that we trust to do things don't do things, um, then there are major consequences that are actually life and death, and
Right.
we don't really think about it. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really important for people to keep in mind, and like, like to just put a bow on the NFT conversation is like, yes, gas, extremely high gas prices is a good, currently it's a good deterrent to over minting things, but like doing addition, like one of one editions as opposed to, um, you know, splitting something up into larger chunks of whatever is like, that's a valid way, like minting as consciously and conservatively as either your body of work or your capacity to output that work reflects. Like, for example, somebody like Beeple, he could mint every one of his 5,000 dailies, but like
Mm-hmm.
Cornelius, for example, doesn't. Like, what is Cornelius's body of work in, from a quantity standpoint of published pieces? Like,
Mm-hmm.
for me, that represents a much better value proposition of like the quality over quantity kind of
Mm-hmm.
component. So yeah, like just encouraging people to like, yes, right now there's a lot of people making bank
Mm-hmm.
on this stuff, but just being mindful of that. I know there's debates on both sides of like the quoted ecological impact. There's like crypto old timers like me who've been in this interested in this thing like predating like 2013, 2014. Like I would probably like on the older side of people who are crypto
Mm-hmm.
literate. Um, this is a concern that I came to terms with a long, long time ago. The like, oh, Bitcoin uses more electricity than like X numbers of nations around the
Right.
world. Like all,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, like that's something that I came to terms with quite a while ago. Yes, it's good and important to keep in mind. Um, it's also at the same time hard for me to resist getting into little, back and forths with the people who are right now just coming to that realization. Like, it's on me and other people to not immediately flame people who are just learning right now that Bitcoin is like ecologically disastrous
Mm-hmm.
just because I've been a fan of it for 7 years and I learned about this 6 years ago.
Right.
That I can't take that away from the people who are right now just figuring out that, hey, this is a thing to continue voicing concern of.
Mm-hmm.
And but then the counterpoint of that is like a lot of these studies don't correctly factor in um, the different sources of energy. Like, for example, half of the year in China during like rain and monsoon season, like the overwhelming portion of their electricity grid comes from hydroelectric power,
Mm.
not coal power. So it's like, well, I don't know how many people who are writing articles factor that in because I
Right.
don't know how educated they are about electrical grids and like power generation because like this is a thing that I've been nerdy about like over the last couple of years of like making my little short film about nuclear power
Mm.
because I wanted to learn about that. So yeah, I don't know. It's just like, there's conversations on all sides. There's a lot of viewpoints. It's important to keep all of those in mind faithfully.
Right.
Not, it's very easy for me to like put my gatekeeping hat on and being like, if you didn't know about crypto prior to 2021, then I don't want you to have an opinion.
Right. Yeah.
It's very easy for me to do that, and I find myself very close to slipping, or even actually slipping into that mindset. But like, um,
Think
yeah,
there.
not positive.
Yeah. There's I accidentally somehow stumbled into making a hot take on Twitter, which I did not mean to do. I meant to make a funny little joke about crypto and the the economic struggles that it has, or not economic, the what's the word I'm looking for?
Ecological.
Ecological. And there was a good conversation down there of a lot of people voicing both sides. My joke was that like everyone loves to save the planet until they can realize they can make a bag dropping
Hmm.
NFTs, and it's like it's just kind of a funny thing where it's like obviously no one wants to destroy the planet, and obviously artists should get paid a lot of money for the hard work they make. Those are two things that can both exist and are kind of funny that they also butt heads at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people are like, is it so bad that I do this bad thing minting when corporations get to just absolutely destroy the earth in front of us and get funded by the government to do so, and the government will actively fight against better ways of getting energy as long as someone pays them to fight for that. And those are big conversations to have by smarter people than I. But I think that, yeah, just having conversations with people, definitely not trying to own someone on the internet or shut someone down, and educate people where you can. Yeah, I mean, I was into crypto 2016, 2017, and I felt like I was the people that are now in 2021. Like, I felt like I had missed the boat, and there were definitely older people that had been in the space, back in 2010, and earlier, where like they had kind of faced the tragedy of like being laughed at for getting into it, and now it's it's the big tech bro finance space, which is just the funniest takeover that I've ever seen. But yeah, there will always be someone that's been there before you, and there will always be people that are joining the space after you, and it's just gatekeeping helps no one, and so it's a good time to definitely resist that urge to do that to people, and just go in with good faith and try to educate people. But there are not good people on the internet that also just want to be jerks and want to troll people. So definitely know when your time is wasted. And I think that's a healthy balance to navigate the internet.
Mm-hmm.
That's I think a good bow tie on this. 2.5 hours. Great talk. I think super easy to talk to people. We've definitely done longer talks than this privately, on our own time, so it's no different than that. But great to have you on. Great to be able to kind of hear your backstory, stuff that I'd already heard, but have it kind of cataloged somewhere. And yeah, people can watch this on YouTube. It will hopefully also be edited into fun little chunks, bite-sized pieces that will be shared out. So that's something we're going to try to do this year on the YouTube channel, so that people don't have to sit through a grueling 2.5 hour live stream.
Dude,
Who would do that to someone?
Twitch highlight channels on YouTube are like, those are my jam, dude.
Yeah,
Those are
my ADH
that's where it's
brain
at.
loves it. It's like, oh, I can maintain, I can concentrate for 5 minutes, but after like 30 minutes into a thing, I'm like, I don't know, we're in a dry spell on this podcast, and just I have to
Mm-hmm.
really love the podcast speakers or the people chatting. But thank you, Glitter Warrior, such a great chat. um, yeah, it's been super fun. Hopefully we can do this again. Might have you on to maybe show off some of your work that you're doing on your personal project. Maybe later in the year we can loop back to that. It'd be a cool little bookend, being
Yeah,
able to
that'd be
have some
rad.
people on. That's goal for this year, is to not just have interviews, but also to have artists share what they're working on, work together, work on something, collaborate, just have more of that stuff, less talking heads. But yeah, it was absolutely fun. Thank you everyone for stopping by, and we'll see you next time, next month, when we have another artist on. See ya.